If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
We are back. I'm Chris Evan, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by my good friend Jeff, MD, 26 years, CIA case officer, aka 007. Agent 711, by the way, is off tonight. He's under the weather, and Randy has company, so he will be joining us tomorrow evening. Tonight, we're going to be covering the next episode in our Long War series with Mike Glover. It'll begin at the top of the hour. Between now and then, Jeff and I have a sit rep of sorts, a situation report for you. But first and foremost, we're going to jump into the conflicted question of the night. For those of you not familiar with conflicted, this is a card game. There's 14 different card decks, all set in post-apocalyptic scenarios. 99% of the questions, Jeff, I'm getting some feedback on the audio through you back to here, by the way. So if I'm hearing it, others are probably hearing as well, but everything I say is coming back through your connection. Anyway, but always, if there's ever going to be a problem with a video, by the way, it's always an audio gremlin. So anyway, tonight's main topic with Mike Glover and myself at the top of the hour will be essentially federations of survival groups working together. So we've discussed at the neighborhood level, this is taking it to the next level where one community teams up with another community, so on and so forth. Interesting topic. But again, before we dive into that, the conflicted question of the night, let's get that up here. All right. Barone felt a mixed sense of sympathy for the unprepared civilians. The man-made and natural disasters that are commonplace in society should encourage everyone to be prepared. Would you show compassion for the unprepared if you had limited supplies, or is this simply a case of natural selection? So normally we answer this question at the end of the podcast, but because it's just Jeff and I for the first half, we're going to take a swing at it right now and get it out of the way. So Jeff, I'll let you go first. What are your thoughts on Barone's conundrum? You're on mute, Jeff.
I was trying to avoid the feedback issue. I would show compassion as far as I could without endangering or sacrificing my family situation or the group situation. I'll always forgive people their mistakes if they admit them. And as long as they're not just, vile, evil people who do it, they don't really feel bad for it. But everybody screws up. And, but again, I'm not going to sacrifice my family. If I've got a little extra food maybe, or I can help them get established or kind of teach them what to do and how to go out and set up their own situation, I'll do that. But as far as inviting them in and sharing everything I have with them, hell no.
Right. Maybe turn your mic up just a hair, Jeff. I've turned you up in the studio as high as I can get.
I was getting a weird.
You're on mute now.
Yeah, let me see what I can figure out here on audio.
All right, I took you off the automatic audio level and cranked you up. So if you get
my mic volume is maxed.
No kidding. I have you maxed here as well. Maybe move the mic a little bit closer to you, just a guess. But while you're mucking around with that, I'll take a swing at this. So I actually like. Let me see here. We're streaming to 9 platforms. We get an aggregated version of the live chat. So there's a tremendous volume of comments that we get. Sometimes they fly by fast, you can read, but I got to give BB a shout out here. Compassion with discernment. This, yeah, I couldn't agree more with this comment. So I would not want to see anybody go without or to suffer, but it's like everything else in life. The first thing you do is you decide what you want. The second thing you do is decide what you're willing to give up to get it. And that's what Jeff was alluding to. And I'm with him. I'm not going to give up the well-being of my family for somebody else. But if I can help in any way whatsoever, I'm absolutely going to do it. So that's our answers tonight for the conflicted question. We'd like to see your answers in the live chat, pardon me, or the comment section down below. And if it seems like we're off to a little bit of a slow start, my wife and I were at Mar-a-Lago last night for another event, and we got home at 0400, and I was in front of my laptop a few short hours after that working. I've been planted here all day, so I'm feeling it. I'm not 20 years old anymore. 56, it takes a little longer to recover. I met a guy last night, Jeff, by the way. He saw me limping because if I spend too much time on my feet, when they did the reconstructive surgery on my abdomen, they had to take a bunch of nerves out of one of my side of my groin into my hip, and the surrounding tissue gets aggravated when I'm up for too long. And the guy mentioned something, about me limping or whatever. And he says, well, you're not half as bad as I am. And he said he was 69. He's like, I got 13 years on you. He said, you're fucked when you get to be my age if you're walking like that at 56. So no compassion whatsoever. So speaking of Mar-a-Lago, I'm going to give you all an update. There's some interesting stuff happened last night. So first and foremost, I'll show you some of the pictures. So this is my beautiful wife and I outside at Mar-a-Lago. It's pretty spectacular property, as I'm sure you all know. Behind that crowd, there's a large pool, and then on the other side of that, there was a stage. And I've got some videos that I'll play, but Chris Darlington, who's a sheriff's deputy and a singer, country and western singer, he performed live last night. Let me tell you who performed live last night that blew the lid off of the place was Aaron Lewis. That guy live sounds as good or better than studio recordings. Absolutely phenomenal performance put on by him. But anyway, this is my beautiful wife Cindy and I, and we kind of stepped away just so we could get a couple pictures here. Next one up, you want to talk about a really, really nice guy, Jeff. This is Chuck Zito. So Chuck Zito, a very infamous New York City Hell's Angel for 25 years, in and out of jail a number of times, and bodyguard to the rich and famous. So this was Sylvester Stallone's bodyguard for many years. He's 72 years old, by the way. And one of our mutual acquaintances said, I'd like to see the two of you go a couple rounds. I was like, yeah, that ain't going to happen. The guy's a killing machine, figuratively speaking. But what a nice guy. And what's interesting is we had 4 retired NYPD cops at our table, 3 of them detectives. And the topic of Chuck Zito came up, and one of them said, yeah, I've known Chuck for over 40 years. He's a really, really nice guy. And I said, from the age of when both sides respected each other, whether it was law enforcement or on, the criminal side. And he said, absolutely. And, of course, that's long gone now. All these people hate the cops and stuff, but just a really interesting guy. If you don't know anything about Chuck Zito, look him up. There's all kinds of interviews out there. He did an interview with Mark from Soft White Underbelly. That's absolutely awesome. Highly recommended viewing. But anyway, what a great guy. What a great time I had conversing with him. So check this out. Some of you may or may not know that Dean Cain, the actor who played Superman, has signed on with ICE. He's an active duty ICE officer. And if you look over his left shoulder right there where, the profile of the gentleman's face is behind him, that's Todd Lyons, the director of ICE. And I spent a fair bit of time talking with both of them. I got to tell you, Dean Cain, what a very, very nice, approachable guy as well, just like Chuck Zito. So moving on from there, I have been going back and forth with General Flynn's admin for 2 years now. We've had him scheduled on SDN twice. The first time he couldn't make it because there was a flight delay. He was in an airport and he couldn't hear him. The second time he was delayed, his assistant called me because he had no internet access. There were a whole bunch of phenomenal speeches last night, Jeff, and General Flynn gave a relatively short speech. It was only a few minutes long. So of all the short speeches, General Flynn blew the lid off of the place. But for the long speeches, Nick Freitas, golly, just phenomenal. I can see him being president of the United States at some point in time. So that being said, I've edited some of the video together here, Jeff, and I'll stop in between to address any questions you might have or see if we see any questions pop up in the chat. But as you can see, this is outside from the opposite direction of where the picture of my wife and I was earlier. So the palm trees that you see in the distance, those are basically on the edge of the intercoastal waterway, and everything else I would be where this picture is being taken from is where we were standing, and you'll see what I mean here in just a second. Let me fire this up. I'll just pause it for a second. So you can't see from here, but that's Chris Darlington singing one of his originals. Now, President Trump wasn't at Mar-a-Lago last night. The last time we were at Mar-a-Lago, he was, Jeff, and that, upper, I don't know what you would call it, gazebo on the roof, basically, there were 2 snipers up there the last time we were there, which was an interesting backdrop. But let me play a little bit more of Chris Darlington here. It's not long. So I want to point out this bar on the right side, Jeff. That's where Cindy and I were standing the last time we were at Mar-a-Lago, and I felt this arm go around my waist. And I turned around, and lo and behold, it was Roseanne Barr. And she looks up at me and she goes, "I'm fucking smashed." And she was just hammered. She ended up sitting beside us that night, and she is every bit the character that she's made out to be. I'll never forget that. So pick it up from there, going to the next section. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the starlight's gleam, who brought stripes and bright stars through the perilous stars. Oh, the ramparts we walked were so gallantly streamed, and the rockets red glare. So I'll pause it there. That guy did a pretty decent job, but last time we were there, Jeff, there was an opera singer who sang the national anthem, and it just blew the lid off of the place. But that gives you an idea of the size of the main dining room. And of course, as per usual, the food was absolutely exquisite. Not a figure of speech. You could literally cut the filet with your fork. It was just absolutely phenomenal food. It's a really cool place that I highly recommend. If you ever have the opportunity to go, by all means do so. Hey, check this out. By the way, I missed this. So the gentleman looking kind of down and to the right where my cursor is here, that's Chris Darlington, who was singing previously. And this gentleman beside him, if I had to guess, was probably like mid-30s. And does this ring a bell, Jeff? You ever heard of neural something or other, blasphemy or something to that effect? He's had multiple brain operations because of this condition. And he actually had wires set into his skull with a box. He showed it all to me afterwards. Neuroblastomy. It was something to that effect. It was you're on mute, Jeff.
Okay. Was it neuroblastoma?
That's it. There you go. What I haven't even had a chance to look it up and research it.
I had a friend die from that.
Give us the Cliff Notes version of what it
Well,
is.
it's a brain tumor is generally inoperable, but that's what John McCain ended up dying of.
Okay. Interesting. Young man to be going through what he was going through, that's for sure.
Yeah,
So
it's a harsh one.
So I've got several videos kind of tied together here with Nick Freitas, and we have a bunch of mutual friends. I had the opportunity to talk at length with Nick last night. I honestly think that this could potentially be JD Vance's VP in 2028 and a potential future president of the United States. His conviction and articulation, absolutely second to none. So the context of this for everybody watching is this was the Big Blue Bash. So this was to honor police officers across the country, federal on down. Some absolutely amazing stories, and to raise money for the Fraternal Order of Police. So keep that in mind as Nick is speaking to this crowd. But you notice he has no teleprompter. He doesn't look down at any notes. He's just a phenomenal human being, and a former Green Beret, by the way, and a legislator in Virginia.
The children, of the spouses of the children, of those who put on the uniform, are afraid of what might happen at their schools, at their daycares, at their place of employment. Well, I'll tell you how it has happened. For too long in this country, we have not only tolerated evil, we have not only accommodated it, we have allowed it to be subtle. And now we have a situation where the good and the true and the honorable and the noble and the brave are afraid, while the evil celebrate in the midst of their women, their wives, and their children. I don't know.
So clearly there, by the way, he's referencing Charlie Kirk's assassination.
What happens from here on out, but I can tell you this much. For the veterans in the room, we did not fight all of those enemies foreign to allow the families of our brave men and women in law enforcement to be threatened and intimidated by those enemies domestic.
I have been blessed to go to some amazing events over my career, and I can honestly say I've never seen anybody speak with the conviction that Nick Freitas has. There's no way you could watch this man speak without being proud to be a fellow American with him. So I got a couple more sections, and if anybody has any questions, by all means, throw them in the live chat. We don't have that much more of this to go. You can see the timer at the bottom, maybe 6 minutes or so. Then we'll be into the main sit rep. But it's worthwhile listening to what some of these people had to say, especially Nick Freitas.
To not only target the men and women who put on a uniform, who put on a badge, who faithfully go out and execute their duties, and those who especially seek to intimidate their families should feel a moment of peace from any of us.
So he's basically saying the people threatening cops and especially ICE agents should not be left in peace. They should pay for, their rhetoric, what they're saying, what they're doing. I mean, it amazes me that we're at this stage in our country, but here we find ourselves. Oh, one more thing before I forget, Jeff, you'll get a kick out of this. Go to any AI out there, liberal, conservative, or otherwise, and ask them who Nick Freitas is. I did it with 11 AIs today, and every single one of them came back that he's either a very dangerous individual, which came from all of the liberal AIs, or he's perceived to be very dangerous by the left from the conservative ones because he's such a great orator and he talks the talk and walks the walk, and he's a combat green beret. This guy is the real deal, like absolute real deal. Play a little bit more of his speech.
Now, in that moment, when they do seek repentance and reconciliation, we will be more than happy to provide it. But until that point comes, The people that are deserving of our consideration, of our effort, of our sacrifice, are the people that go out and choose to do a job that they know very well could cause their wives to be widows, their children to lose a mother or a father, and yet they do it. So what exactly are we afraid of? Are we afraid of offending people that are constantly offended? No.
By the way, Jeff, I don't know if you noticed the bottom left corner, our good friend Sheriff Mark Lamb was the MC last night. That's him off to the side.
Oh, yeah.
He did a phenomenal job, by the way.
There's only one entity in this world that we should be afraid of, and that is God alone. Everybody else. How dare any of us shrink from the responsibility that we owe to God, that we owe to our country, that we owe to everyone else that came before us to ensure that we can live in the country that we have. So let us recommit ourselves to our God, to the mission He has put before us, to all those that have come before us, so that one day when we meet them again, we will not be embarrassed to stand in their presence. And let us remember that the only ultimate obligation that we have is to one day stand before Christ, to stand before God the Father and hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Thank you.
President Trump.
So again, that's just a small section of his speech, Jeff, but it was the best of all the speeches, including, here's our friend Tom Homan. I had a chance to speak with him last night, but I like Tom Homan. He's a great speaker. He's not afraid of anything, but he's not the orator that Nick Freitas is. Nick Freitas is POTUS material. This is pretty cool, though, with Tom Homan. Check this out.
Trump's the greatest president in history of this nation. Get on your damn feet. I want to see it. Because I'm going to send this video to the boss I need to say. If I can remember my passport. All right. I'm going to send this to my boss when I leave her tonight. So let's leave here. USA, USA, let's do it. Go!
USA! 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 USA!
And look, I want to say one last thing I want to say. The media comes at me every day. I read hit pieces on me every day. Every day. They think they're scaring me or not. They think they'll make me go away. I'm not. Because every hit piece I read, you'll gas in my part. Tom Homan ain't leaving until President Trump leaves. And I'm going to finish the job. I promise President Trump what we're going to do. God bless America. God bless President Trump. We got more work to do. And I promise you, I'll get it done. This is the man right here. As here is on holiday. Nation.
So, I mean, it was short and sweet, but it was good. He's got conviction. He's just not the orator Nick Freitas is. But the final speech of the night, and it was one of the shortest ones, was General Flynn. And I had a chance, as you saw from the pictures before, to converse with him privately as well. He's got some pretty scary stuff to say. For those of you who didn't catch it, 2 days ago, he was on Alex Jones's show, and he said, we have concrete evidence that we're facing mass terrorist attacks across the country within the next 90 days. The very first thing he said to me last night on that topic, he said, Chris, he said, you know, I was the head of the DIA, right? The Defense Intelligence Agency. And I said, yeah. And that's when he went on to speak about how we have hard intel regarding 9/11 2.0. So if you don't want to take our word for it, of course, we cover it 5 nights a week, then at least listen to General Flynn, who has access to intelligence that we don't have. But it raises the $1 million question. Why is the FBI saying there's no threat? Why are we cooperating with people like Jelani, you know, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, now leader of Syria? boggles the mind. But anyway, listen to what General Flynn has to say. It's important. And it looks like we've got about 1 minute and 59 seconds left in this video segment, and then we'll hit the sit rep hard.
People in this room understand what I'm talking about. It's everybody outside of this room. Every single American has a duty and a responsibility to stand up and serve, because we are facing pure evil, and that evil is not going to go away because one man lives in the White House. It's not going to happen. In this country, we have one God, we have one nation, and we have one life. So make it matter. Make it matter. Give these guys here this foundation. Give me your full support, because they're trying to make a difference for our country, for the law enforcement professionals that we have in this country. Make your life matter. Whatever you do tonight, fine. When you wake up tomorrow morning and you wake up over these next couple of days and you start thinking about, what are you doing in your life? What are you doing in your community? If you can't answer that question quickly, then you're not doing enough. You're not doing enough in this country. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's a lot of people out there, there's a lot of people that we're live streaming to right now. Make your life matter. Make our country matter. Make the future of our country, give it your best shot. Because if you don't give it your best shot, ladies and gentlemen, we're not one generation away, like Ronald Reagan said. We are not one president away. We are one election away. So we have got to make whatever it is that we do tomorrow morning, the next day, the next week, the next month, and the next year, we've got to make every single day matter. So thank you very much to these great Americans, these great patriots, every single one of you. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you.
I want to pause it just quickly to give credit to this man walking up the stairs right here. This is my friend Kyle Reyes. He owns a national level marketing firm. He owns lawenforcementtoday.com. Phenomenal guy. We've shot some TV shows together. We did a TV show with, oh my goodness. Jeff, what's the guy's name that Bob Seafail has for Boom America? The OG from, dang it. That show where they invest, money in people.
Oh, like Shark Tank?
Yeah. So Bob has one called Boom America that's like Shark Tank. The original Kevin Harrington.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Kyle and Kevin Harrington and I have done some of the Boom America shows, but I definitely wanted to give a shout out to Kyle there. He's just a super guy. He took the bull by the horns on this one and kicked ass. So with that being said, we're going to pivot into the sit rep for the next 30 minutes or so. And Mike Glover will be joining me at the top of the hour for tonight's main topic. But the first one here is from our friend Sarah Adams, betrayal, the act of being disloyal. And we know what the rest of it is. And there you go. So Jolani, who is the head of Syria, was Al-Qaeda. Then he broke off. He was the guy who broke ISIS off from Al-Qaeda. I will not say former Al-Qaeda. I will not say former ISIS. This guy was on our top 10 global most wanted list. I think the reward was about $10 million as well, up until a couple months ago. Then he mysteriously disappeared off of that list. Why are we cooperating with this guy, Jeff? Why are we not only cooperating? Because I can tell you right now, the 4 NYPD that were sitting at my table, gobsmacked by this guy. The nerve.
I don't know why they expect the leopard to change his spots, but I think they really think he will. I don't know. They're just looking the easy way out. Sometimes you got to fight, and a lot of people just don't want to. And if they can just pretend that the bad guy goes away, they're satisfied with that.
It's I don't know what to say. I'm gobsmacked by it myself. So next one up here. Remember, the enemy will twist any event to fit their own narrative across their platforms in circles. I'm getting that audio feedback pretty bad, by the way, Jeff.
I can mute mine.
Yeah, it's looping through your mic and speakers and coming back out again. But anyway, Remember, the enemy will twist any event to fit their own narrative across their platforms and circles. Why our president gave them this opening is beyond foolish. Al-Qaeda sees this as a win for them and a loss for us, and they'll keep exploiting this meeting to advance their ongoing operations. We said it before. During Haqqani's first visit with the new administration, he reported back to Al-Qaeda that Trump's team wouldn't stop the plot, meaning 9/11 2.0. An image manipulated like this only reinforces that dangerous assessment. So it's not just that Jelani came to New York City in September and spoke at the UN. It's not just that Jelani was back again this week and in the Oval Office. At least from this picture, it appears that Donald Trump is saluting Jelani, and I'm just shaking my head. I've been saying that I've been on the borderline of being black-pilled. I'm absolutely black-pilled now. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I don't know if you want to add anything to this, but this is a pile of bullshit, in my opinion, Jeff. You're on mute, Jeff.
This blows me away is why we're kowtowing to this guy at all, why we're giving him the time of day. He's just basically going to say, give me money. And then when you stop giving him money, he's going to start blowing shit up again.
Yeah, well, check this out.
It's like paying protection money to the mob. Hey, nice restaurant you have here. Terrible if something happened to it.
Right. Check this out. It's even gone beyond that, where Trump is acting like he's buddy with this scumbag. This is bad. Trump asked Syrian president how many wives he has. One with you guys, you never know, then pats him on the arm. Sarah says, no question about the women he kidnapped and forced to be his sex slaves. What happened to their poor souls? But sure, a terrorist love life is so funny.
And then the other one is your wife. How many wives? Your wife. You guys would never know, right?
It's not funny. It's just, it's not funny. My God. Anyway, moving on to the next one. ISIS West Africa claimed responsibility for an attack against Christians in Nigeria. As mentioned by observers, the group's intensified its attacks on vulnerable Christian following Trump's threats. So this is something that I've personally been tracking for months now. We've reported on it many times. Trump spoke out about it last week, but a lot of people don't realize that this genocide in Nigeria, and it's particularly brutal, where they're going to Christian churches while they're in service and beheading them, torturing them, doing all sorts of heinous things. How come we're not doing anything about this one, Jeff? I mean, if we're going to stick our nose in other people's businesses, you think we would protect Christians?
I don't understand all this, what battles they choose to fight, to be honest with you. It's just baffling to me that you can acknowledge, this is happening, but then go, oh well, not our problem. Well, there's a lot of things that aren't our problem that people get upset if we don't get involved. And I tell you what, I'd rather get involved saving innocent lives than becoming friends with freaking terrorists.
I would have asked Khalid this question if he was with us tonight, but I'm sure you're more than capable of answering it as well. What is the capacity of ISIS in West Africa? Like, how significant of a force are they? Clearly, they're a killing force, but where do they stand in the pecking order, let's say?
I'm not sure if it's ISIS per se or ISIS-aligned groups.
Okay.
It's just like in Somalia, you've got, you had Al-Qaeda, but you have Al-Shabaab. You've got these other groups that are like Al-Qaeda light. They're, brothers from another mother kind of thing. And there's groups, I can't remember the name of the group that was in Nigeria that was basically kidnapped like 250 Christian girls and took them and ran off with them. But they are not, as far as I understand, I could be wrong, they are not like ISIS or Al-Qaeda proper, but they are a local affiliate, sort of like a franchisee.
Gotcha. So moving on to the next one here. This week I'm releasing 200 plus pages of undeniable evidence, fully organized and sourced, documenting how a vast transnational labor cartel turned America's visa system into a human trafficking market. They forged resumes, falsified credentials, and sold visa sponsorships and green cards to the highest bidder. They were legitimized by Forbes Inc. magazine and handed hundreds of thousands in government contracts, rewarded with nearly 14 million in PPP refunds, and given unrestricted visa access while American workers were fired, blacklisted, and replaced. Undeniable proof that the H-1B program didn't just fail, it became the weapon used against us. This isn't talent mobility, it's not immigration, it's organized labor trafficking disguised as tech consulting, a global racket selling people, selling visas, and selling out America. This wasn't a secret network. It was a business model hiding in plain sight. Regulators ignored it, corporations funded it, and law firms helped build it. And now WorldNet Daily is giving Americans a front row seat to the evidence exposing it all. This is just unbelievable. First question, Jeff. If this is one organization that we know of that's done this, how many are there out there that we don't know about?
Oh, I'm sure there's tons. People will, if they can make a buck, they'll make a buck, and they don't. There's so many people who just don't give a rat's ass about what's good for their country or their fellow Americans. If they can make money by importing cheap labor from India or Pakistan or Malaysia or wherever, they'll do it. And they don't care about the results. All they care about is, are they getting paid? And they're basically trafficking in labor like people traffic in drugs. As long as there's a demand, they'll provide it.
Yeah, I think it's another example of follow the money, and you'll find out who's. And
the companies are hiring these people. Yeah, if they came over here and there was no jobs for them, they wouldn't be coming.
So speaking of money, Gunther Eagleman threw up yesterday. What kind of Congress sends $40 to $87 million per week of American taxpayer money to the Taliban? Khalid says some weeks it's actually over 100 million. We've discussed this ad nauseum, so we don't need to dive into it. The only reason I put it up here, Jeff, was just another reminder to our audience, especially new members in our audience who aren't aware of these vast sums of money that we're paying the Taliban under the agreement that they will keep the terrorists in check, when in reality, they're harboring everybody under the Islamic Army, whether it's AQ, ISIS, ISKP, all of them, TTP, etc. But what's really heinous about this is that the Taliban are dressing up their own schmucks, sending them into Pakistan to commit terrorist acts, dressed up as ISIS, Al Qaeda, whoever. Then they come back into Afghanistan, the Taliban kill them, and then turn around and say to Sebastian Gorka, see, we're a good partner. These guys were ISIS, and they just went and did this terrorist attack. We looked after it for you. I can't believe that this is happening. So part of this, speaking of, labor trafficking, Jeff, was an idiotic comment on Trump's part that we have to go to India because we just don't have enough talent, right? So here's an image of Control Center in Houston, Johnson Control Center, when Neil Armstrong stepped foot on the moon. And Logan Hall asked the question, weird, where is all the so-called H-1B talent in this photo? I don't know if you want to add to that or not, Jeff, but.
Well, we have enough talent in this country on its own. We created the atomic bomb. We put a man on the moon. We invented the airplane. We invented the telephone. Almost everything in this modern world was invented in America. So why the hell do we have to import talent from other countries? Especially low-level stuff.
Just as a quick aside, I debated whether or not to play a particular video that I caught on X yesterday. And so there was some scientist, maybe 40, 50 years ago, did this exhaustive study that said the average Jewish person has an IQ of 114. The average Asian person has an IQ of 112. The average Caucasian has an IQ level of 110. The average Black person in America has an average IQ of 90 and an average IQ of below 70 in Africa. And his thesis was that the ones in Africa who were essentially retards versus the ones here in America that scored a little higher at 90 is because of gene mixing, because of some diversity and whatnot. But I'm with Nick Freitas on this. Why do we even give a shit if we offend them anymore? Because it doesn't matter what we say. It could be nice. It could be not nice. It could be somewhere in between. They're going to be pissed off and offended, and they want to kill all of us anyway.
Yeah.
There was an attempt on Cat Turd's life this weekend that I'm sure many people aren't even aware of. And he threw up a post and said, if you're a conservative influencer, be aware that you're in their sights. So anyway, moving on from there. So the Trump admin not only let Al Jilani, the Al Qaeda guy, off the hook with billions unfrozen, 120 billion, by the way, but also handed out a Syria general license, GL-25, that basically lifted sanctions. Translation: the Assad family and their cronies just got their aviation, energy, telecom, and port monopolies back, all under the banner of sanctions relief. Meanwhile, Jilani's HTS is delisted. Americans are still missing, and terrorist financiers are popping champagne in Damascus. This isn't strategy. It's foreign policy lunacy on parade. So let's just peel another layer of this onion, Jeff. So not only do we let Jilani come in September and then again this Monday, but we're doing to Syria what Obama did to Iran. We're enabling them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And we're giving them the money to do what they want to do.
I don't get it. I seriously don't get it. Is there any chance, Jeff, that in your mind, I'm telling you, in my mind there is, because I'm black-pilled now, that Trump is just part of the whole scheme of political theater that we have?
I don't think he is, but I do think he's a businessman. He knows the economy. He knows that. But I think a lot of the foreign policy stuff beyond the financial, I mean, he knows how to cut a deal. He knows how to do trade deals. He knows how to, impose sanctions where he knows it will hurt and things like that. But where I think he doesn't know is with a lot of this kind of foreign policy, when you're talking about dealing with Islamic terrorist organizations and things like that, he didn't have any experience with that. And so rightfully, he hires people to do it essentially on his behalf who theoretically know better, but he's hiring people who are just apologists for the terrorists. You don't beat Hitler by hiring a bunch of Neville Chamberlains. Right. And it seems like that's what he's doing.
I got to tell you, I'm gobsmacked. I mean, I've been a strong Trump supporter. I still think he's better than anything like Kamala Harris is concerned. But I have deep, deep concerns over some of the vetting and decisions that he's making, just like he did in his first administration. So moving on from there, Iraq held parliamentary elections today, and some people became too excited. Heavy gunfires were reported inside the palace and guest house of Minister Khalid Batal and MP Ayman Salah in Haditha Anbar Governorate. 41 seconds. I won't play the whole thing, but this is how they celebrated.
Welcome to the Middle East, man.
So do these men walking around in dresses not realize that what goes up must come down? Like, how come we don't see all the videos of those projectiles coming back down and killing somebody?
Because they're fired at a slight angle to where they come down about, half a mile away. And so it's not going to be falling on my head. Now, there's people killed in Iraq all the time from after wedding parties because those bullets come up and they come back down. They'll hit some little kid in the head or kill a donkey or do whatever. Yeah, there's. I mean, it happens here. You get these idiots who shoot guns in the air, and they'll end up hitting somebody. So it's got to happen over there all the time. They just don't talk about it.
Yeah, it absolutely has to. I mean, what a dangerous thing to do. But anyway,
physics, man.
Right. Breaking Somalia e-visa data breach exposes Americans and other foreign nationals. Several photos and passport details belonging to U.S. citizens have now been identified among the leaked Somalia e-visa data. The breach contains thousands of files, including images and documents from applicants across multiple countries. If you see yourself in any of the released images or have recently applied for a Somalia e-visa, act immediately. So Somalia, this kills me. As bad as the average IQ is in the entire continent of Africa, Somalia is ranked right at the bottom. So you have the stupidest mofos in the entire world are able to breach our systems. I don't know what to say.
I'm assuming they hired it out.
They hired, but like H-1B visas, they went and hired some Indian to do it for them.
We got some smart Indian guy to hack into it for him.
All right. I don't know what the hell they're doing, but golly. So moving on to the next one, the U.S. reportedly planning a $500 million military base on the Gaza-Israel border to host thousands of troops supporting a ceasefire. What are your thoughts on this, Jeff? I mean, we're right back into this shit up to our armpits again.
Yeah, this is dumb. You don't want to be in the middle of that because that peace will not last. Hamas will not go a year, probably won't even go 6 months before they start lobbing rockets into Israel again. And the last thing you want is our troops between them.
So that's actually where I was going to go with it, question-wise. I mean, doesn't this put us in a pretty, the people that are in the base, doesn't that put them in a fairly precarious position?
Yeah.
Trapped between Muslims and Jews?
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you don't want to be the Klan separating the Hatfields from the McCoys.
Right.
And that's basically what you're doing. And they're thinking, okay, if we're there, Hamas dare not attack Israel, and Israel dare not attack Hamas. Well, Hamas, being Hamas, they'll attack. They'll figure some way to do it. They'll launch rockets that will, they'll lob into, they'll hit Tel Aviv or Haifa or somewhere. And then Israel, being Israel, will blow the shit out of them in response. And we're going to be sitting in the middle. What are we going to do? We're going to shoot down Israeli helicopters as they go to retaliate against Hamas for lobbing rockets at a beach? I don't think so. It's just stupid.
Yeah. I've said countless times, as you know, I don't want anything to do with that whole part.
Well, neither one of that. In that situation, neither side is worth the life of a single American soldier.
100,000% in agreement there. So this is from Khalid. Erdogan is the de facto head of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's on his interest to covertly support terror groups, which is why so many have safe haven in Turkey. It's not the Turkish people we blame. It's the dictator sitting on top. You took responsibility for the ceasefire, yet the Taliban is blowing it up in our faces. During the second phase of negotiations, we were pulling back, but your delegation insisted we stay and hold the ceasefire. Why buy them time when you had no control over, I think it says, a written agreement? I mean, I don't even know what to ask about this stuff, Jeff. I'm sitting here just shaking my head because I'm blown away by this. Any thoughts on Turkey and Erdogan?
Well, Turkey used to be one of my favorite countries. I've been there a few times. I really love Istanbul. And the Turkish people were always just super nice, but Erdogan is he's kind of a lunatic, and he's a more than a bit of a dictator. So he is, and Turkey used to have good relations with everybody. They're a NATO member. They used to have really good relations with Israel. They were one of their only friends in the Middle East besides, Jordan. But ever since he came into power, everything's just gone to hell. And I think he is trying to establish his bona fides as a leader of the Muslim world. And I almost think he wants to kind of reconstitute the damn Ottoman Empire. He probably would if he could.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but does Turkey not have the largest standing army in that part of the world and something like the third largest in the world manpower wise?
They do. They have a large standing army, and the Turkish soldiers were good. They were good soldiers. They aren't the best equipped army in the world,
Okay.
but yeah, they're a good sized army. But their main focus for decades has always been Greece. They've been pissing on each other's Cheerios for decades, for the better part of 100 years, and Constantinople, Istanbul was Constantinople, which was, was the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. It was considered one of the mother cities of Greece. It was Byzantium before it was Constantinople, and it was Greek. It was a Greek city, and it fell to the Ottomans, and then the Turks have held on to it. So it's the largest church in the world for the longest time was the Hagia Sophia, which was Constantinople. Massive church, beautiful church. I've been in it. Gorgeous building, built by the Romans, but it's now a mosque and has been for a few hundred years now.
Yeah, crazy stuff. I see Mike Glover's joined us backstage, so I'll just breeze through the next couple here. So this one, Jeff, school in lockdown after migrant starts chanting about demons and children. Our Lady of the Wayside Catholic Primary School on Stratford Road in Shirley was locked down after the man described on social media as Black African entered the car park and started chanting in front of the children. The school immediately called the police, who were unable to apprehend him.
It's got to be England. It's got to be Britain.
It is. And
of course.
I figured you would connect that one pretty quickly, but
they say car park, but yeah, he couldn't. Yeah, we couldn't find him. So, and don't say anything bad about him, or we'll put you in jail because we can find.
Exactly, and it's
Someone
funny.
will go to jail for identifying him as a Black African.
I actually had a story queued up that Donald Trump and Keir Starmer going on about how he's the defender of free speech and so on and so forth. Nothing could be further from the truth. So we'll wrap up on this one. Jeff and I briefly mentioned it already, but if you're a conservative influencer, keep your head on a swivel. The violent left wants to kill you. I learned that lesson the hard way this weekend. So again, I think it comes back to what Charlie Kirk's friend said when he was questioned by somebody on a school property. Well, if you guys would just listen to us, if you would just listen to the other side, maybe we'd be able to, find some common ground. His response was, what? Charlie Kirk gave everybody the opportunity to speak their piece and they still killed them. So fuck you, fuck you. We're not biting our tongue anymore. But here's what happens when you don't bite your tongue. I have yet to see anything in the news ever from somebody who's a conservative American threatening to kill woke progressive people. Have you seen anything like that? Because I sure haven't. Yeah.
No, never have.
So anyway, I guess we'll leave it at that, Jeff, and I appreciate your time tonight and your insight. And we will see you tomorrow night for the next episode.
All righty. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Take care. So I want to just briefly, before I bring Mike on stage here, mention that if you go to survivaldispatch.news, we're running a special right now. John Wheaton has been knocking it out of the park with our ThreatWire security bulletins. And we're running a special based on that. So between now and Friday night at midnight, you can get 20% off annual memberships for a Guardian subscription. So instead of $74.99 a year, it's $59.99 a year, and you get an extra couple of months for free above and beyond that versus paying monthly. And there's links down below and all the video descriptions. And if you don't click the link and you just go to survivaldispatch.news, it's really simple. TW20 gets you 20% off. And again, it ends at midnight on Friday night. But we added a 5th signal channel this week, which is specific to ThreatWire. And the reason that I did that is because we've had articles deleted on Patreon. We've been kicked off of Facebook. We've been kicked off of YouTube. We've had strikes on YouTube. We've been kicked off of LinkedIn, and the list goes on and on and on. Substack by far and away is the strongest platform as far as no censorship and no suppression. However, the only thing that stays the same is that nothing stays the same in the tech industry. And if somebody else comes along and buys Substack, it would not surprise me to see people like us get nuked off the platform. Signal, on the other hand, is open source software. I've reviewed the source code multiple times in their GitHub myself, as have hundreds of thousands of other programmers. There's no backdoors in Signals. The encryption has not been cracked. Anybody who's trying to position Signal as being vulnerable, it's always based on social engineering, where they trick somebody to give up their username and password. That applies to all systems or all software, not just Signal. Signal is rock solid. So that's why we have 5 Signal channels now. So when you sign up as a Survival Dispatch Guardian, you get access to all those Signal channels. We have a Guardians chat, which is general information. We have a survival and prepping chat, which is a totally on, topic of survival and prepping topics. It's amazing. I'm watching people share things like recipes for homemade fertilizer that's not laden with chemicals, et cetera, et cetera. We have a read-only channel called the Crusaders, where we have a news team of 12 individuals just cranking out the news stories in there. We have the new Threatwire channel, which is for the security bulletins that are issued by John or other people's security bulletins as well. So think of it as like a security bulletin / intel channel. Absolutely exploded. And then the 5th one is our SDENS channel, which is Survival Dispatch Emergency Notification System. And if and when the shit hits the fan, we send out SDENS notifications. It goes to your email. It goes to our Substack, survivaldispatch.news. It goes to the Signal channel for all of our Guardian members. It also goes to the POClink radios. Now, we hit pause on the POClink radios because they're updating the smartphone app to stop the QR codes from expiring and easing the limits of 100 radios per group. Stay tuned. We will have a solution for it imminently. I'm assured by POClink that no later than next week, we will have a QR code to share with you all of you who are Guardians, by the way, to get your radios included. And the other cool thing is, by the way, when you have the smartphone app, if your POClink radio is not in a service area, the battery's dead, the smartphone app has a recording of all messages sent to your group. You could have multiple groups, by the way, not just the Survival Dispatch Emergency one, and you could play them back from the smartphone app. So it's pretty cool stuff. So with that being said, I want to bring Mike on stage here to join me. Let me get him up here. Mr. Glover, how are you?
How's it going?
Living the dream, one nightmare at a time. Tim will say, what is the temperature out there in Utah right now, by the way, Mike? Because it's cold as hell until you go to South Florida here.
I think it's in the 50s today, maybe even close to 60. It's 51 right now. And then tomorrow's high is 62 and sunny. But we're behind in snow, like massively behind in snow.
I'll be honest with you, Mike, we are not too far off of you here in Central Florida. We were in South Florida yesterday, and of course, it's a totally different world there. Yeah, check it out. 55 degrees here right now. So,
That's freezing for Florida.
Well, and I mean, you grew up in this county. You grew up in Volusia County, so you, all people would know, if anybody would know. So anyway, I appreciate you joining me tonight, Mike. Khalid's under the weather, so he won't be with us tonight. So we'll be able to get through this, I think, in fairly quick order, but it's an important one. So we wrote this 144 episode series on post 9/11 2.0, and the reason I recap at each episode is because you can watch any episode in any order by itself or not and still have context. So post 9/11 2.0 means that 9/11 2.0 intelligence says that the Islamic Army, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, etc., are going to attack 10 to 15 tier 2 American cities between 100,000, 500,000 population. Each of those cities will have somewhere in the neighborhood of 10, 11, 12 sleeper cells. Each sleeper cell will have anywhere from 4 to 10 or 12 bad guys in it. They will strike soft targets simultaneously in each city and simultaneously across the country. They will then lie in wait for the first responders to show up, and they'll let off bigger secondary attacks like vehicle-borne IEDs to kill as many first responders as possible. They'll be dressed up as first responders themselves. This will pan out just like Mumbai 2008, and it'll end up converging on a tier 1 trauma center, and they will lay siege to it. And as Mike has mentioned to y'all, outside of Delta Team and Army Rangers helping them around the periphery, there's no way you're going to clear those. The HRT, the hostage rescue teams, FBI has 4 of them, are not equipped to unsiege a hospital with many thousands of people, 3, 4, 5,000 people in many tier 1 locations. So actually, Mike, before we dive into some stuff, I got to get your feedback on this. So 2 days ago, General Flynn went on Alex Jones's show and said, we have irrefutable evidence showing that 9/11 2.0 is going to happen in the next 90 days. And then I had the tremendous, privilege last night, as you know, being at Mar-a-Lago. I had a chance to talk to General Flynn. And the very first thing he asked me, Mike, is he said, you do know I was the head of the DIA previously. And I said, yes, I knew that, which is Defense Intelligence Agency. His assistant introduced me to him as, this is the guy we've been trying to get you on his podcast, who's doing the 9/11 2.0 podcast. So he specifically brought up the topic. And after he said that he was head of the DIA, when he said we have hard evidence, he was referring to his contacts still inside of the DIA. And he probably has multiple contacts inside of other intelligence agencies. Give me your general thoughts on General Flynn, what, as far as your perception of him, where you put him from a credibility standpoint, because you were CIA yourself after being a Green Beret. I know some people don't like General Flynn. I do. When I shook his hand, it was like when I shook your hand. It was 100% genuine. But I want to hear your professional opinion on getting intel from General Flynn.
Yeah, he's highly respected. I mean, part of his tenure is standing up an intelligence organization, the Defense Department, or the Department of War now. And that was a feat, especially because likely he was going head to head with the CIA. And so the ability for a general officer to develop and lead an organization competing with 17 other intelligence organizations in the IC, you got to be squared away. And also, it doesn't surprise me that he is saying this, because so many politicians are not, because politicians are weighing risk based on politics, based on perception, based on public relations, not based on security. Like, the first thing that you should do if you know there's an attack, you don't even have to necessarily put out the details, but you should give what's called a warning order, a warno, to get people's minds rolling in the right direction for, if this potentially does happen, what are we going to do to be better prepared? And if he is blowing the whistle on this and putting out the warno, then it's a substantial, likely credible threat.
I appreciate you saying that, Mike, because my comment to him was, if you take all of our web assets for Survival Dispatch, we generate 11, 12 million views per month. So we're nowhere near being in a top tier channel as far as people like yourself and Sean Ryan, etc. But still enough, to hopefully make a difference. But I thanked him. I said, thank you very much for adding credence to what we've been covering for a long, long time now, because I think a lot of people stood up and paid attention 2 days ago, because I got flooded with messages about it. So,
yeah.
And being friends with you, I respect your opinion. I'm glad to hear that you're thinking along the same lines. So let me paint the picture for tonight on alliances and confederations. So we've talked before, mutual assistance groups, neighborhood groups, all that kind of stuff. But if you're going up to a bigger picture, now you're talking, this alliance and this alliance, separate communities, perhaps separate towns, counties, whatever, coming together and rebuilding post 9/11 2.0. So again, we've had these complex coordinated terror attacks in this scenario. And I think the most effective people, and I think you and I have discussed this ad nauseum, but will be the ones who have communications down pat. If you can't communicate, it's pretty hard to have a group, right? And especially to communicate with other groups. But in addition to that, all the other things that you've covered before, whether it be vetting procedures, training exercises, some nascent elements of transparent governance, all of those sort of things. So again, we've had in this scenario, we've had the attacks, we've got blackouts, bombs, shooters, kill zones, ISIS running wild, complete and utter anarchy. But when things start to come to an end and the neighborhoods who are aware of this stuff because they've been watching your podcast, our podcast, etc., they have a plan to come together. The chances that they survive are much better. I don't know if I've ever asked this question before, Mike, but how do these terrorist sleeper cells pivot when faced with an immovable object, figuratively speaking? So in other words, if these terrorists are planning on attacking community X and they approach community X and they see that it's heavily fortified, but they know community Y over there is not so fortified, will they pivot and go to Y, or do they just stick to the plan that they're given?
No, they'll remain adaptable. I mean, one of the things that terrorists will do is exploit vulnerabilities and weakness. And so they're not trying to go after hard targets. It's why it's so important for people listening to this to understand that just with some basic training and specific skill sets and equipment, if you put up a fight, they're likely to retreat because they're not going to want to fight. The intent of a person who's a terrorist is to terrorize people, not fight people. There's a big difference between training up for the battlefield in the Green Mountains of Benghazi and then making a trek to be a martyr in Iraq versus a terrorist in a sleeper cell who's likely potentially never been in a gunfight ever, who is just going to exploit the weaknesses and vulnerabilities of the innocent, really. And so if they're going to attack and blow up a lot of places, if they meet any resistance, they're going to break contact or they'll potentially just die in place. So it's not like I was fighting, Libyan foreign fighters in Iraq, and they were very formidable. We knew if we were fighting Libyan foreign fighters because they were very well trained, they could put rounds on target, and you better have your A game because you would be potentially killed. These guys are not the A team of combatants. They're like the B team of combatants and the A team of exploitation. So I would say, it's very important to understand, like, if you could just stand as a community, as a family, even as an individual, and put rounds on target, shoot, move, and communicate, and do the basics right, I think they're going to divert and just not want to waste time with anybody who's giving them any kind of resistance.
So Mumbai 2008, we know that there was a command and control group in Afghanistan and Pakistan who were watching social media, watching the news, and communicating with the terrorists in Mumbai and telling them, "Whoa, hold up, don't stay right where you are. Cops are on their way. Get ready to hit them with the next one." Or, "Hey, go attack this other place over there because it's wide open right now." Is that if you take that element away from them, Mike, do they still pivot, or are they just kind of mindless drones?
No, I think they will pivot as long as it means survival, if that's the objective. If it's not the objective, they won't pivot and they'll just clock themselves off. That happens all the time. I think it's probably what happened in Pakistan and Islamabad with the potential terrorist attack that was semi-thwarted with a vehicle-borne IED. It's like they had a plan. Oh crap, it's not working. Too much heat, too much pressure, and they clock themselves off, which is what you need, heat and pressure. I guess that could be like a breaching joke or an explosive joke. It's like there's too much physical heat and pressure. They feel that pressure, they get stressed out, and they just clock themselves off. That's likely to happen, especially if That's the objective. If the objective is many casualties as possible, they run into any resistance, they're just going to, duck their head, go head first into the situation and die.
Okay, well, I appreciate. Let me get you up on the other stage here, Mike. This works a little bit better. Pardon me. So, Mike, let's say that we have these communities, which we do, that are paying attention. Call them modern day Minutemen, whatever you want to call them. What are some of the things that people should, basically have their ear to the ground for that indicates the shit's fixing to really hit the fan because whatever just happened?
If timing isn't in sync and they're paying attention, for example, X is great as a platform because it's reporting more information in real time. It's like, it reminds me of like Waze or Maps as an app. You're driving on a highway, you're looking at the route in front of you because all the people in their cars are reporting situational awareness and what's going on in front of them. You get a better picture before you even run into the traffic jam, right? And it diverts your route. It's the same thing. If you're monitoring information and intel on X and there's an attack, let's say specifically there's an attack in a school somewhere. Well, guess what? The first thing I would be doing is going to get my kids out of school. The first thing I'll be doing is, hey, is this a isolated incident? Does it look like it is a terrorist attack? And if so, could it fit into a larger scale, deliberate, strategic attack across the country? I mean, when 9/11 happened and the towers were hit, there were reports and indications on Flight 93 that were being communicated to passengers in the planes saying, hey, they already launched planes into buildings. This is not going to look good, which is why they, as an element, as a group of guys, decided to say, hey, let's go. I mean, that's what they said. That's the last thing they said. Let's go. And they ran in and basically thwarted an attack that was likely due for a government civilian installation or building and crashed into a field in Pennsylvania and likely saved hundreds, if not thousands of lives because of that. So again, pay attention to social media platforms, try to get situational awareness. When Charlie Kirk was killed down the road from my house, 30 minutes down the road from my house, I told my entire family, get home right now, and even diverted their route back to the house because I was like, I didn't want to take the chance if it was something more comprehensive.
Yeah, great advice. Absolutely, Mike. So I'm wondering, like, in the context of groups forming federations with other groups, obviously there's legwork that has to be done prior to attack, proactively as opposed to reactively. But if you have all these attacks happening and they have a high level of awareness and they know what's going on and they're now reacting to it, what's the first move do you think that one of these groups should do, reaching out to another one when they're in a situation where law enforcement, whether it's feds, local, sheriff, whatever, is just so thin that you reach out to the other federation or other group to combine forces? When does that happen in the scheme of things?
I think it happens immediately. It's like a call roster. You have an emergency situation. Like, I used to be on the pager in special operations where, if that pager went off 3 a.m, you better start making phone calls and getting your stuff together and moving towards the base because you're likely going to be on a C-17 in a very short period of time. And when you have different groups that might or might not have a relationship with law enforcement, you need to be reaching out and contacting law enforcement and let them know what you have. Look, there's a lot of law enforcement officers who hate, because of liability mostly, hate the relationships with community-driven elements. It could be like when I was in Yavapai County in Prescott, I was on the Yavapai little search and rescue element. And I was on that because I wanted to help the community. And and be involved in the community if something happened. I didn't care if I was standing in a road directing traffic. Well, in a situation where you have terrorist attacks, the best thing that law enforcement could do is have those pre-established relationships, same with the community organization, and have those guys on speed dial. And if something happens, you just give them a call. At least build initial rapport, so when they get the call, it's from a known entity, and be like, hey guys, all the sheriffs here know me. Some of them used to work for me. I know the sheriff. And if something happened, I'm going to pick up the phone and be like, hey guys, this is, who I am. I have this many guys. What do you need us to do? And a smart law enforcement officer, sergeant, or sheriff will integrate those guys into the overall community plan. If they don't, we're doing it anyway. That's the reality.
I'm sure there are, but are you aware, pardon me, of any SOs or local PDs who actually have SOPs that when they get a call from seasoned GWAT vets like yourself, that they even have a process to follow?
Nearly none do. I've actually asked that question. Nearly none do, and it's because it's never really happened. Now, they do have that protocol for disasters. They have that protocol for big accidents that potentially happened. But I've never heard of that protocol for a terrorist attack, because it's the hardest thing for these people to realize in law enforcement or first responders. They're going to be stretched so thin, and all of the resources are going to be diminished. You can't stay up forever. You got to go home and sleep. And a lot of these guys are going to want to take care of their own families. So it's smart to have an auxiliary force, a proxy element that at least you got some points of contact of.
Are you familiar with Richard Jones from Butler County, Ohio? He's a good old boy. Here's an interesting thing. If you look up American accents, you will see what's referred to as like an Appalachian accent. Call it Andy Griffith accent that runs from the South, basically from North Florida all the way up into part of Ohio. And so he's a good old boy. He's got a strong Southern accent. In the first go around with an auxiliary, I'm glad you used that word, he spent something like $250,000 of his budget on training. I want to say it was somewhere around 30 private individuals that he could call upon. And then he did a second one of these deals. And he now has 2 groups of civilians, GWAT vets, etc., that are trained, have the equipment, and are ready to kind of fold into his forces. I've heard rumors of other sheriffs doing it, but I don't know of anybody besides Sheriff Richard Jones from Butler County who's doing it myself. So take that for whatever that's worth. One thing I do want to quickly mention is, you said people paying attention to X. As we know, Americans don't trust legacy media at all, especially if you're not a baby boomer. From Gen X down, we don't trust them. Mike, I've been telling people one of the advantages of being a Guardian member is that we have thousands of members across the country now that are reporting in on Signal with real-time accounts of what's actually going on in their part of the world. And we don't have to think to ourselves, is this a real report? Is it bullshit like the national media, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just an interesting value add. But let's move into segment number 2. The first hours of this happening and locking down your block, so to speak. So, you've got sirens wailing, you've got smoke all over the place and fires. Everybody's taking a gut punch at the exact same time. But, those people who are paying attention right now and have talked through this and have made plans, they're going to be on their game, hopefully really, really quickly, barricading entrances to their neighborhoods, with cars, or what do you call it, Mike, when you have to zigzag through stuff to enter? Say that again?
A chicane.
Chicane. Okay. Thank you. So doing stuff like that for people getting in and out. And I would say that all of this stuff is, you practice the way you play, right? So if they've done any drills on this stuff, the organized people it's going to show and they're going to react quickly, but the ones who don't react quickly might not be necessarily in the best spot. but you can also trigger all of these things to happen, right? Limit access. You've got people now on their radios communicating. You've got people staged in that, next ring in and the next ring in, so on and so forth. But, I would say within 2 hours, maybe less. That's why I want to hear your opinion on this, that if you do have an organized group, within 2 hours, at the very least, you should have your group assembled, your checkpoints locked down, and be more than prepared for the jihadis to try and come into your neighborhood like they did in Israel in 10/7. What's the time frame there, Mike? Like, I know it's going to vary, and I know I'm asking you to speculate, but let's talk suburbia. So the shit's hitting the fan in the urban city. They've sieged the hospital. They have all these other cells, that are lit up, and they're coming to suburbia. Is this something that happens later in the day? Does it happen simultaneously in the middle of the day? Like, how much time does a neighborhood group have to actually prepare? Is 2 hours way too long or just right?
Well, it just depends. Honestly, I think 2 hours is probably a little quick in civilian speak, depending on the disaster. As you know, if people across the country are going to work at 9 to 5 in that town, and something pops off in the city and they work in the city, they're going to be gridlocked in. And so if they don't have a bug out plan to mobilize and get back to their homes or back to rendezvous, it's going to take more than 2 hours. I mean, it potentially could take days. Wow. I mean, it's not unheard of. And so that's the importance and significance of not just having a plan like this. Everybody has a plan to bug out. The problem with the idea of bugging in is people are talking about, what do I do when I just bed down? We call it bed down. What is it called? What are the protocols when you bed down? Well, when you bed down and you lock the doors and you basically set up a base. Well, bugging in is literally, what's my plan for leaving work? I get gridlocked in my Jeep. I got a mountain bike attached to the back of it. Now I just ride the bike to get back home, and I grab a 72-hour bug out that's in the trunk or in the back of the Jeep. You need to have a plan to basically transport your physical self in this worst case scenario back to the house to even start. I mean, all of that's 0 hour. When you get to the location and start to rendezvous and consolidate and mobilize, then you're in the net positive of that timeline. But again, it's very challenging. One of the things I've kind of evolved in my own thinking of being prepared is having a bike or having an e-bike or having a motorcycle at your place of work, in your vehicle, because that's really the only way you're going to be able to move around when every road, which will be the case, is gridlocked and there's law enforcement checkpoints not allowing anybody to move. They want everything to stop so they can track and navigate where the bad guys are. That's obviously not conducive to your family's survival.
Yeah, a great point, Mike. Quickly, so when that pager went off, how long did you guys have to get to the base and get on the plane and exfil?
It just depended, but most of the recall was 1 hour. You had an hour to get from where you were to the base, to the organization, which was tied into the Air Force base, and then you could be wheels up in a few hours. Wow. And so it happened fast. And if you were on call or recall, then all your stuff was already pre-packed on a pallet. So you didn't have to pack anything besides yourself in that airplane. It's why, guys, when you're on recall, you can't be a certain distance or certain time from being able to respond. And if you were late, if you missed movement, you were fired. More than likely, you were fired.
If the call for help went out to, Green Berets, Delta Team, etc., because y'all were needed to, immediately get to these 10, 15 cities that have been sieged, realistically, how long does it take to get you guys on the ground in those cities prepared to take on these shitheads?
It's a good question. I know the timeline for, wheels up and being anywhere in the world. It's less than a day. And that's based on flight times. But in the continental United States, there is a contingency to flex that C-17 to any airport. And honestly, it's as fast as a C-17 can fly.
Okay.
Because that's going to be your main means of transportation for personnel and equipment, including vehicles if necessary. But it would happen pretty fast, relatively fast. I mean, you think about the flight time from, Fort Bragg, North Carolina to New York City or Dallas, Texas. It's only going to be outside of the recall hour, a couple hours.
So I'm going off, off script, moving away from the brief just for a second. If you had one tier 1 hospital that, let's say, has 3,000 people, like 3,000 total between patients and staff, and it's sieged, how many guys do you have to have in your team to go in and to attempt to unsiege it, for starters? How many Green Berets, Delta Team guys have to go in?
You don't really need a lot. I mean, I would say the minimum force that you would need is 6 guys. And that's because that's the size of a team.
Okay.
And several teams make up a troop, and then you have several troops per squadron. But that's the minimum force that would be required. Now you're bypassing, for example, guys or gals that you don't know if they're good or bad, and you might assume they're good or bad, whereby if you did a large hit with a squadron or with a company, then you would have the luxury of rolling everybody up, flex cuffing them, isolating them, and then what's called hot washing them, basically putting them through a custody and detention type filtration triage to identify who's potentially a bad guy, who's potentially a good guy. In a crisis circumstance, I would say a minimum of 6, because you need that fighting element to basically seize the element of surprise and violence of action. It can honestly be done with 1. I mean, there's known cases in GWAT history to include an SAS operator that did it. He had lots of help. There was help there. A couple Delta Force operators in different countries in Africa. It can be done with 1 guy. I mean, 1 guy with the skill set, with the weapon system. That's all you need, really. I mean, to be honest, like in some cases, more people is not going to be more advantageous.
So let's go back to the number 6, like a 6-man team. I assume that's a team that knows each other intimately, like they've trained and drilled together on a regular basis.
They can operate without saying a word to one another, and the advantage with 6 guys is the speed in which you could clear real estate. I mean, 1 guy in single man CQB takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. 2 guys is the minimum for close quarters battle, according to the doctrine, because you need 1 man to clear left and 1 man to clear right. When you have the ability to go clear left, clear right, clear center of the threshold left, center of the threshold right, and also pick up your 6 o'clock all simultaneously, near simultaneously, it's very fast. When you have organic members of the team who have breaching skill sets, medical first aid skill sets, communication skill sets, you're very optimized as a tactical element for doing shoot, move, and communicate with a minimum of 6.
So again, we're way off script here, but this is fascinating stuff. I don't know, maybe 2 years ago when I first met Rob O'Neill, I was asking him, what happened in the initial phase of them getting deployed. And he said basically they were all called to Washington, and there was I don't remember the number, you probably do, it was like 30 guys or something like that, 2 helicopters worth of guys. And he said that they were given no information at all what they were there for. until the last minute. And there was a presentation done that was very, very short. And that was it. They were on their way to Pakistan to do the mission. And he said most of the people didn't even know each other, let alone having been trained together. And I said, so you guys had you didn't do any training as a group before you sieged this building? And he said, next to none. We went through intelligence briefings. Basically, we got on the plane and we left. Is that standard, at that high for all the teams, guys, that basically if you, let's just choose Sean Ryan for example, and let's say you and Sean didn't know each other and you were tasked with going and doing something like this, could you two operate together as good as if you've been together for years? Because Rob was basically saying, I don't disbelieve him at all, but he was basically saying we were so well trained, everything was so well ingrained. It's just like you're a machine on wide open throttle and programmed to do what you got to do.
Yeah, everybody's a cog on a wheel, and that wheel moves in the same direction. And so when you look at like the example of me and Sean never went through training together at the same time. Yet when we did a YouTube video on it where we did CQB together, it was seamless because we're taught the same standard. And then that same standard in shooting qualifications and skill sets and CQB is the standard for the entire element. And what they did with the Osama bin Laden raid, what they did was they took the leadership, the most senior guys. And I think that was more of a, hey, we don't necessarily want young guys on because this is one of the biggest hits in history. Let's take the most senior of guys, the guys who are leading teams of young men, and we can't afford any mistakes. And also it had to do with the classification of the operation, which is very compartmentalized. I mean, at the time of the bin Laden raid, the Neptune Sphere, I was in Delta Force, and I went to work that morning, and people were like, hey, did you hear? And I'm like, hear what? Like, oh, they killed bin Laden last night. I'm like,
no shit.
I'm like, how are you a member of Delta and nobody knew that was going to happen? Well, it's because it was compartmentalized. It was a need to know. And many people outside of the organization that was tasked for doing it, they were the only ones that needed to know. And a lot of that had to do with they didn't want to compromise the op. And they had a real good chance of getting him, and any information leaked out, especially to the press, would have meant complete compromise, and they would have lost the opportunity.
Man, that's incredible, Mike. So again, we're down this rabbit hole. So one of the things that happened on that mission was that a breacher, and I know you've done plenty of breaching, qualified as a breacher, set up at this door, the first big door that they came to. And when they breached the door, they discovered it was just a solid cement wall behind it. Have you ever encountered anything like that in the missions you went on, where you had all this subterfuge of what looked like entrances but weren't entrances, just to throw attackers off?
Oh, for sure. I mean, a lot of buildings in that part of the world have gated metal, like made of steel, front doors and gates that you would breach with an explosive charge thinking you were hitting the front entrance of the house, and it blasts the door into a 4 foot by 4 foot room. And you're like, why would they put a door on a 4 foot by 4 foot room that big?
Mike is frozen up a bit.
You got me?
Mike, you still with me?
Yeah, I got you. Full bars. You got me?
Hey, you still with me, Mike? Mike, can you hear me? We hit a glitch here. Can you hear me, Mike?
You got me?
I've got you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No? Can anybody in the audience hear me? If you can hear me in the audience, put a 1 in the live chat. We just
Get
had.
me?
I can hear you. Yeah, but you can't hear me.
I can't hear you.
Okay, let me take you off. Put you right back on. So they're hearing me on YouTube.
I see the timer.
Yeah.
And everything looks good, but
Let me take you off and put you back on again.
how about now?
Can you hear me now?
How about now?
Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me, Mike? I can hear you.
No volume.
Exit and come back in again, Mike. Exit and come
Here,
back.
I'll come out and then come back in.
Yep, perfect. All right, apologies for that. I don't know what that blip was there, but the entire studio, what we're looking at in StreamYard, went completely black. So apparently we were discussing something that the powers that be didn't want us to be discussing. And apologies for going off on this tangent with Mike here tonight, but it's a rather fascinating topic. And his type of guys, being Delta Team, highest level in the world for spec ops teams, it's really interesting to hear his thoughts. I would have thought that you would need more than 6 people to unsiege a hospital like that, but pretty amazing that you don't. It makes sense when he explained it. And let's see if we get him back in here now. Can you hear me, Mike?
I got you, yeah.
Wow, that was weird, man. The whole studio went black. We've had a couple really weird glitches with StreamYard lately like that. But anyway, I digress. So let me get you on the other stage. There we go. Because I've got a couple other questions for you. Did you have a thought you wanted to finish on Operation?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Just wanted to make sure I didn't cut you off there. What's the biggest mistake that these neighborhood groups / MAGs, mutual assistance groups, what's the biggest mistake they make initially when they get the first piece of information that says we're under attack?
Well, I think the biggest mistake is going to be potentially overreacting. Like the idea that we're under attack implies that you're supposed to do something. And sometimes the action is inaction, right? Sometimes not doing anything at all and being tactically patient is the right action. And so, like, I remember on 9/11 when it happened, I was in college at the time, and I had just transitioned out of active duty. I went home and got my uniform and threw it in the washer. And I still don't even know to this day why I did that. But I started packing my bags like I was going to go somewhere because I thought, we're at war. This is what I've been waiting for. It's my responsibility to go. And then I called my chain of command. They're like, oh, we're not going anywhere, man. We're in the National Guard. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should get out of the National Guard. So I think trying to be proactive when the best thing you could do is sit idle, protect your family and friends and your community group, and just stand by. Again, self-preservation is key. And I don't think there's a lot of need for, even if you have the tactical skill set, to get in the way initially when there are first responders out there doing the job.
Great feedback. So the next question would be, not everybody spends the time and money and effort to become high-level radio operators, communications people, those sort of things. So a lot of people, as you know, they go out, they buy, a Baofeng or something like that, like a UV5R. They don't have a license. They charge it. They put it in a drawer thinking that they'll just pull it out when the shit hits the fan. So let's assume that a lot of these groups have no encryption, like they don't have business class radios. How vulnerable are those groups to having their information compromised by these jihadis because they're using unencrypted standard channels on a Baofeng or whatever the radio might be?
Honestly, I don't think, one of the things that we haven't really dug into is communications and how that would affect potential compromise with one of these attacks. Look, the last thing that these guys are going to worry about is monitoring signal intelligence. They're just not going to do it. I don't even think they would do it justifyingly for their own force protection, because they might have a radio like an ICOM type radio to open scan, a police scanner, right?
Okay.
That would be very advantageous for them. But it's what I tell people about this, like POC-Link, you know, like, the UV5R, the same thing is with the Baofeng. Everybody's like, what's made in China? I was like, so is the iPhone. You're texting, you're commenting on YouTube. You're literally have more compromise with the iPhone or the Microsoft 10 version of anything you're using, because it was just shown recently to be compromised by China for the last decade, by the way. So this idea that the ham radio in your hand made in China, or the POC-Link radio with a SIM card, is going to be somehow compromised, the last thing that they would look at is the signal intelligence in that communication line of sight. It's not going to be grossly impacted or affected. With that being said, you know, there is infrastructure that would potentially be protected, like Starlink, because I trust Elon Musk as a patriot will protect that. I mean, he's actually starting his own version of Signal and WhatsApp that's going to be more secure. But I don't have that level of confidence with Verizon or AT&T, which is constantly hacked. And so if the Chinese have access into one of those things, potentially the terrorists do as well. So.
Yeah, good point. You know, and part of that vulnerability, by the way, with the iPhones that some people, or probably most people, are not aware of, is that unless you're using an application that is specifically written to obfuscate what you are typing into it. So in other words, imagine you've got an app, Mike, that I send a message from me to you, and it's encrypted from me to you. What's not encrypted is me hitting the keys on this end. So that was part of the vulnerability. They could always get one half of the conversation, even if the conversation was encrypted, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. But I want to back up, because you've got a wealth of knowledge on a topic, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into it. You know, I'm not a Delta operator like you. I'm just a good old boy from the country. And I've been telling people ever since I acquired Survival Dispatch that having a get home bag and a get home plan is more important than a bug out, you know, plan, because most people, 83% of Americans live in cities. They have nowhere to bug out to. They're going to have to bug in, but to bug in, they got to get home, just like you pointed out. I want you to go a little bit further with that, in whatever order you want, but recommended things for people having their get home bag. What type of planning should they put towards a get home plan? What do you do about kids who are at school? Is that a rally point where you meet at the school to get your kids to get them home? And what else am I missing in there? But I want to hear your input on that, just because this is your forte.
Yeah, a get home bag is pretty easy. The primary consideration is security. I would have a breakdown 300 blackout. Even an AR would be advantageous, especially because you're going to likely be on foot or on a bike. You need a little bit more muzzle velocity in feet per second just to reach out. You know, a 5.56 by 45 millimeter rifle. I don't care if it's a AR-15 platform or a Mini 14 platform. You're looking at 2,700 plus feet per, or 2,500 plus feet per second. You're also looking at a minimum effective range of 500 meters. I mean, that's doctrinal. Area targets 800 meters, which means it's incoming, and it's still transitioning in transonic, which just means it's still semi-reliable. And so you want to focus on security as being the primary means of how you get home, and potentially have to prioritize everything going on. Like I wouldn't pack a lot of food, for example, in a get home bag. You can go 30 days without food. You can go 3 days without water. Water consideration might be one of the things. Like I've been on ops where we're like, we'll be back soon. And then we're on the op for 12, 24 hours, and everybody starts drinking out of the hose in Iraq, and everybody gets giardia because there's bacteria and poop in the water. And so, you know, you always want to plan for, like, hey, it takes me 12 hours. That's the best case scenario to get home on foot via the distance. Well, why don't I just plan for a 3-day op? So everything would be a 72-hour bug out or bug take home or get home or bug in bag. 72 hours is a great consideration, a 3-day consideration for all the things that you need. When you talk about kids, here's the problem with kids. Most kids are going to be dependent on what the teachers do and how they control the circumstance. We see how Uvalde turned out, right? There's only so far they can go before they just lock the doors and pray for the best. And if they're unlucky enough, they'll get their door kicked in, and then most of the classroom will be killed, including the teachers. The best thing you could do is teach your kids, especially if they're teenagers, to say, listen, if my dad said to me, hey, look, there's no even an explanation necessary. If your kid is a teenager and there's a circumstance where there's an active shooter, the school locks down, something bad has happened, and your child feels unsafe in that circumstance, and you have communication with them, tell them to leave. Because the most dangerous place they could be is locked down in a classroom, hiding under a desk, praying for the best. Also, a no comms plan, a rendezvous plan. Let's say I can't communicate with my child because the grid is turned off, or the towers are turned off. Well, then you say to your kid, hey, if something goes down and you have a bad feeling and dad hasn't contacted you for 30 minutes, I want you to make a plan to rendezvous at the house, right? And then that's a pre-deliberate plan that we planned out. Like, we put a bike at grandma's house, which is across the street from the school. You get on that, you ride that bike to dad's house. If it's not safe enough, you go inside of grandma's house and you lock yourself down, and then I'll come to you. Like, a no comms plan is always what you do when you leave somebody behind and they don't have a specific way to communicate. It's, hey, this is me. I'm going out. I'm leaving for this long. This is what you need to do. If we can't communicate, this is the rendezvous location. It's a basic like 5W for no comms.
Yeah, that's a fascinating subject, Mike. I appreciate the insight on that. So moving on to segment number 3, teaming up neighborhoods, churches, Minutemen, militia, whatever you want to call them. So let's say the dust has settled over these initial attacks, which again, 9/11 2.0 is not going to be a one and done. It's going to kick off terrorist attacks for the rest of our lives, our kids' lives, and our grandchildren's lives. You can't let hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of terrorists into your country and expect that we're not going to suffer some pretty severe repercussions when it comes to terrorist attacks. So again, we're past the initial attack. The dust is starting to settle, but again, follow-on attacks are most likely coming pretty quickly and frequently thereafter. So you've got all these groups trying to come together. If you have a group, if you don't have a group yet, you should have started on it yesterday. I suggest you start on it tomorrow, and you're going to end up with a motley crew, right? You're going to have, everything from the PTA mom to people like Delta Team, like Mike Glover, and pretty much everything in between. But if everybody has their roles defined, you have SOPs, standard operating procedures, fleshed out, things should come together relatively quickly, as Mike pointed out. And I would say that the one thing that kind of stitches all of this together are the children, because it's, protecting the kids is, critical for everybody, whether they have kids at home or not, but also protecting grandma, which is interesting. Mike would mention that. In other words, protecting the most vulnerable in our communities is kind of that thing that glues groups together. So let's assume, Mike, that people haven't started down this path yet. How do you get skeptical neighbors, like the anti-gun crowd, those sort of people, on board with working with other people in the neighborhood or in the area who may be looked upon as militia, Minutemen, whatever the case may be? Or do you just completely forego that because they live in an alternate universe to us and you just don't even make them part of the conversation?
Yeah, they're more of a liability than anything. I wouldn't waste the time, to be honest. And more now than ever, we've completely become so detached from each other as human beings. It's one of the biggest issues that we have, mental health wise, physical health wise as well, is our inability to work together, communicate, and do normal interpersonal actions that we would as human beings, like when we grew up in the 80s. And so that's a huge problem. I identify people as liabilities or potential assets. If they're a liability, if they're arguing with me because they don't understand the point, well, then I am not going to try to make somebody pick up what I'm laying down. I'm not going to waste the time.
That's great advice. Like really, really good advice. So Mike, obviously, like most of our groups don't have people at your level. Okay. So let's assume that the average group has a handful of guys, good old boys that are, firearms proficient, but they're not operators. And you need to do things like go on supply runs, go help somebody, those sort of things. What kind of drills would you recommend where you have a handful of protectors plus a handful of worker bees, for lack of a better term, to carry out whatever the thing is that they're trying to do? Because 3 guys by themselves may not be able to move everything needs to be moved for the supply run or something else.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk about the word operator. Like in Delta, I was a technical reconnaissance expert. In Special Forces, I was a sniper. And as a team sergeant, I was a recon team sergeant. As a young SF guy, I was a weapons specialist. I had many specialties throughout my entire career, and I consider myself a jack of all trades. But you would see me in garrison as a sergeant major mowing the lawn of our base. You would see me picking up trash with my guys. You would see me downrange doing logistical runs, or building a mosque with my Afghans in Afghanistan, which I did with my own hands.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah,
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, you have to remember, like 99% of the job is going to be all the basic skill sets of just basic necessity. That's like washing your ass. Like everybody's got to wash their ass. I'm not going to wash your ass. You got to wash your own ass.
Right.
But it's like there's things that you have to do that are common to all. And so the security component, I might be the subject matter expert in security for my particular group, but that doesn't mean I'm not a contributor in other ways. And that doesn't mean I can't have other people who have no idea what they're doing and giving them specific instructions. One of the benefits I had before I became a Green Beret was I was an infantry team leader. And as an infantry team leader in the Army, I know how to run the dumbest people on the planet. Like no offense to young infantrymen, but I've met some really dumb people in the infantry. But they're very capable, and what they do well is they take instructions very well. Mm-hmm. So if I told my, not to pick on Alabama, that's just the first state that came to mind when I went to mention like just aptitude. But if I took a corn-fed saw gunner or M60 240 machine gunner, and I told him, I want you to point the gun at that door. If anybody comes to that door that's not American, I want you to shoot them. Well, they're going to do that, right? And so we have the ability to kind of cross-pollinate and cross-work together, even in security, by giving real good, concise, clear instructions with good leadership. And it doesn't even require good leadership. You just need to be a good manager.
That makes sense. So when you've worked, like you said, whether you're working with Afghanis or people who maybe are or are not familiar with you, again, this is just out of nowhere, this question, but I just want to hear what your experience is like. Can you give me an example of something that happened that brought people together in the field really quickly who didn't know each other prior to the thing happening? Something that just galvanized them, made them gel.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a gunfight. I mean, whether it's coalition forces or it's especially working with host nation partnered forces or indigenous forces, the first gunfight and people overcoming their own fears, helping each other out, even personal acts of bravery, that's always going to bring an element together because they overcame adversity in the worst circumstance. And so every gunfight that I've been in, especially with Afghans, Iraqis, it's always brought us closer. I mean, there's always speculation when you work with indigenous elements, whether or not they're going to get your back. And then when you're in a gunfight with an Iraqi operator standing next to you, mowing down the enemy because he's executing what you taught him for the last 3 months, and you both survive, that brings you very close together. A buddy of mine, Omar, who's a member of the Iraqi counterterrorism force, who I used to work with his company or his troop in Iraq doing side-by-side operations. He now owns a semi-truck company in Texas, actually has a CDL.
Wow.
And now he's subcontracting in Israel, which I'll be there in springtime with Vanguard podcast guy, the guy from the Vanguard podcast.
Okay.
I'll be there with him in Israel and visiting my buddy. My buddy Omar texted me last night. He's like, "Hey man, I wanted to say what's up. I'm with some SF guys, and they wanted to say hello." I was laying next to my kids, so I didn't want to wake them up. But I said, "Tell the guys I said hello." And it's like, man, that was 15 years ago.
Wow.
And we still have a relationship based on us working together, training together, and operating together in gunfights.
That's an amazing story, Mike. And I knew you'd have some kick-ass example of that. So we're getting ready to pivot into the last two segments, segment 4 and 5. I just want to give you all a quick reminder. If you go to survivaldispatch.news and you sign up as a Guardian between now and midnight on Friday night for an annual membership, you get 20% off. So for $59.99 a year, you get full access to all of our Signal channels, and you get a whole bunch of other value adds included with that as well. But the Signal channels is a big deal. I'll tell you this much. I've been asked numerous times now, why are we putting so much effort into Signal? Well, if we put stuff on Patreon, I've had Patreon articles taken down. I've gotten strikes on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. There is nobody censoring anything you or we have to say on Signal. So it's the best of both worlds. It's a secure platform. And again, if you're not a programmer and you haven't looked at the source code like I have and tens of thousands of other programmers, don't take the bait that said Signal was vulnerable. Signal has zero vulnerabilities in it or backdoors at this point in time, known vulnerabilities. And all of the previous what have been termed as exploits for Signal were somebody being manipulated through social engineering to give up their username and password. Has nothing to do with Signal. That's social engineering, completely different thing. So moving right along and getting into segment number 4, this is actually, we get a little bit more into gearing up, like comms and tactical plays and all the stuff that go with that. So imagine we're another chunk of time down the road here past the initial attack, and there's follow-on attacks coming, but we've got everybody in place now at this point in time. All the nuts and bolts have been assembled. We've got people all up on their comms, and we've got people positioned at choke points for our neighborhoods. We've got people doing patrols. We've got intelligence coming in from other groups in other areas that we have communications established with. And hopefully we have people who are maybe not at Mike Glover's level, but a fairly high level that are tacticians and can help position everything, like we're covering our flanks. Mike has done some incredible, quick lessons on that, by the way. And actually, you know what? That's a perfect time. Before I complete the rest of the section, Mike, you spoke to this before. We watched a video, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was like 4 guys coming into a building, and you broke it down, and you said, okay, the lead guy's doing this, second guy's doing this, all the way to the last guy, like you said, has got the 6. And you had a term for it, and I can't remember what it was for CQB, like, that each person's doing. Maybe if you could explain that again, because it was good information.
Yeah, it's called cross coverage. And what happens when an element is walking down a corridor, a hallway, which is essentially a long threshold, a long fatal funnel. When you're doing that, you're covering each other's movement against the walls. The wall is your blind spot. And so if you have 2 operators or 2 people that are walking down the edges of the building's walls in that hallway, they wouldn't just be staring straight ahead. They'd actually be covering each other in front. Because let's say this guy has a door in front of him here, and this guy has a door in front of him here. Well, they can't see inside the door. But from across the angle of vantage from across the hall, you could see into the doorway. If somebody presented themselves, obviously the person in front of the barrel pointing down the hall would see them. But if they're hiding in that room shallow, it takes good angles to be able to see that. So what I was saying is they're moving down, they're cross covering each other, while the person in the middle is typically pulling long, and the person in trail is typically, he doesn't necessarily have to walk backwards, but he's like looking behind him to make sure that he's not giving anything up, and he's protecting the element.
That's interesting. As you know, I'm blind in my left eye, prosthetic eye, and I used to love riding dirt bikes and four-wheelers and stuff. And I used to wear a mirror on the back of my gloves. So while I was riding, I could hold up my hand and quickly check behind me. Like if I was on a dirt bike that had no mirrors on, it was perfect for me to see what was coming from behind. But as you were saying that, Mike, I was thinking about when I did some training as a civilian years ago on slicing the pie. In other words, going through that doorway that's a fatal funnel and progressing around. Is that kind of what you're describing with the two guys going down the hall? You've got one can slice the pie on that door and this guy can slice the pie on that door, sort of thing?
Yeah, it's slicing the pie is a good analogy because it's about taking one segment of the pie at a time. So if you're looking into a door and it's an open threshold, then you don't want to take it all at once, because if you just stand there in the middle of the doorway, well, obviously you're more vulnerable and you're a big target, versus if you're using relative cover and you're catching an angle and then you're taking one section at a time, you could methodically clear all of that at once. Now, with advanced counterterrorism elements, they really don't slice the pie as deliberately because they're very confident in breaking the shot, and then also recognizing the threat and distinguishing friend from foe. They're the best in the world at it. So that where it would be very deliberate with potentially, a civilian who's doing it for the first time, or maybe for the first time in real life, for an operator, it would happen very fast.
Let me just give a sports analogy, only because I played football, was captain of the football team. Let's say that you're a rush end, an outside linebacker, and you've seen the same play happen countless times before. You just react to it. In other words, if your job is to contain the play, you know that nobody gets between you and the sideline, and it's an outside in force sort of thing. And again, it's just 100% reaction, call it, muscle memory, second nature, whatever the case may be. Do you remember crossing that threshold for this sort of stuff like CQB, where you no longer had to think about what you should be doing, what the next move is? You just found yourself automatically doing it, which, by the way, I would say if you have to stop and think, you're half a step behind and you're not in the play soon enough, and in your line of work, you'd be placing yourself in dangerous. But do you remember waking up one day, Mike, after doing this stuff and just thinking, fuck, I went through that whole thing and I didn't even have to think about it? It was just like autopilot.
Yeah, most of it started with going overseas and then getting the reps in combat. In combat, we often mostly do operations at night. So, I mean, you take a daylight CQB scenario and it's further complicated by putting on night vision and infrared laser on your rifle. But when you get used to it, I mean, I could run and gun at night with NVGs. I mean, we used to run obstacle courses at night that were pretty dangerous obstacle courses with the ropes and, traversing beams at height. We used to do those in full kit with NVGs at night because it would basically develop our depth perception and our confidence in moving with NVGs. And so as I got better at moving and getting more confident, man, it was secondhand to me. I mean, I literally could see guys in front of me and know who they were by the way they gated with their feet. I mean, the way they moved their upper body, the way they turned their body, not even their profile or their outline, just the way they moved. I could pick up on who it was and have confidence in doing that CQB with them.
Yeah, So while we're on this topic of night vision, just because it's a fascinating topic, I've read stories, but I've never heard this firsthand from anybody. I'm wondering if you can confirm it, or is it just an urban legend? But I've read stories online where our guys were in the Middle East and there's a jihadi in a second story window who's watching and he's looking everywhere. Of course, has no night vision. And all of our guys put their, IR beams on the guy's forehead, and he ended up rubbing his forehead because it got hot or something like that. Or is that is that an urban legend, or does that shit really happen?
No, that really happens. That really happens. And if it's a terrorist, we're not putting it in his forehead, we're putting it in his eyes.
Oh, that's awesome. Sounds like a guy who'd range find their neighbors to me, but So the next one would be, of course, we have a very good mutual friend who was actually seated with us at Mar-a-Lago last night, Jeff Nicholas, who was, one of your best friends, not him, but his role, right? So those of you who don't know, a Night Stalker, 160 basically was their, what would you call that, regiment number or something? Or
yeah, it's 160. It's a task. It's the task force. I mean, it's
okay.
160th. It's called SOAR, Special Operations Aviation Regiment. They're a regiment by organization.
Okay. So what many of you people don't know, the guys who would take, guys like Mike in and out for these missions would fly Black Hawk helicopters with night vision on. And this is the old night vision, where you're talking, what did they have, Mike? Like 40 degrees of view. It wasn't panoramic. Like what do we have today?
Rolls. Yeah.
What is it now? Like what's the panoramic
it's
field?
Nearly 270. Yeah.
Wow. Seriously.
Yeah.
Holy shit. That's amazing. I didn't realize it was that far. So you just mentioned how difficult sometimes it is to do these moves, the beams and all this kind of stuff, night vision on. How fucking hard is it to fly a helicopter when you've got this much vision?
Those guys are the best, man. It would scare me initially when we were flying with 160th because of things they were doing. I mean, I've been picked up in courtyards with little birds where they land them in the courtyard. I've been picked up in parking lots with 3 Black Hawks side by side in a very small space that you would never think they could get in there. I've landed little birds on the edges and tops of buildings and infiltrated onto target. So these guys, really quickly, you realize how skilled they are. I mean, every Black Hawk pilot that I've rolled with in Iraq, I even have a letter of recommendation from a CW4 from Task Force because I wanted to be a pilot at one point. They would land these helicopters like airplanes. They come in and flare them and then touch them down like an airplane and keep rolling down the runway. They're the best. I mean, they say Night Stalkers don't quit, NSDQ, and it's true. Night Stalkers don't quit, and they're the best out of any skill set that I've ever seen. Even operators, that high level of qualification and training and capability on target is tier 1. It's top notch.
So it's ironic because Jeff Nicholas was a CW4, so Chief Warrant Officer level 4, and our friend Don Mann was a CW3, by the way. I don't know if you knew that, but here's a crazy story. Jeff was coming in to land at DFW, flying with night vision, and somebody had put up a tower on the north side that it was on private property, had not been approved, and there were guy lines holding this tower in place, and he clipped it with one of his chopper blades, and the whole chopper started doing this thing, and he had to do an emergency landing. And of course, with the limited field of vision, with, like you said, 2 toilet paper rolls, when he put the helicopter down, it was in the middle of a giant field full of fucking propane tanks. He was like, if it wasn't for the hand of God guiding him, if they had to hit those tanks, you know what happens, right? DRT sort of thing, just insane. So just a quick answer here. Scott, my wife and I were back at Mar-a-Lago last night. It's a semi-regular thing for us to attend events at Mar-a-Lago. I'm like the Forrest Gump of the business world. I get invited all these cool things. Michael will tell you I'm never the smartest guy in the room, but I probably got the biggest cement head out of anybody in the room. I just pound it away.
Or no, you're not the smartest guy in the room, but you're always in the room.
Well, there you go. See, that's why I'm not the smartest guy in the room, because I don't think of witty things to say like that. So with that being said, let me just get us into segment 4 a little bit further here. Well, actually, you know what? We've already kind of laid the groundwork on all of this stuff as far as comms and these tactical plays and people functioning as a unit together. Here's a question for you, Mike. And this is one of the very few areas I have fair bit of knowledge on, not in a military perspective, but definitely as a civilian. What's the cheapest, most foolproof way to set up secure communications between alliance groups or federations? So not your group that's just in your mutual access group, but your group here and the next group over.
That's a good question. I mean, encrypted communications via RF is, I mean, it's challenging because those radios by Harris are pretty hard to get.
Yeah.
One of the best ways is covert means of comms, meaning you have predetermined words or predetermined phrases or a code that you've navigated to decipher. Obviously, open source apps, according to Elon Musk, they're all compromised. I've used plenty of them overseas, even working for the CIA. That would be the best way that I would recommend, is pushing it through Signal. There's nothing better than Signal that I know of right now. It's going to be Elon's new thing because there are backdoors to all these apps, especially because they advertise. And if you advertise, that's the backdoor, because they're literally plugging in a backdoor to be able to show you the advertisement. And if they're capable of doing that in your conversation, then they're capable of infiltrating the conversation. So I would say Starlink, if infrastructure is down, Starlink on your cell phone, pushing data over Signal would be my recommendation.
You got to address this, Mike, because it's perfect for you. Not electronic, but could dead drops be a possibility? Mike founded a blog called deaddropintel.org. That's funny you should ask that question, but go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, for sure. Dead drops is the best way. I mean, look, you don't necessarily have to do dead drops, but it would be advantageous if you're trying to keep the group affiliation a secret. And there's many reasons why you would do that. So if you're communicating dead drop, it just means, for people who don't know what that means, is it's basically an unattributed conversation. You're going in, you're dropping a note, a mark, a type of signal, and the other person is coming along, not directly interacting with you. So there's no attribution of contact.
Yeah, appreciate it, Mike. So here's what I'll add. Imagine that infrastructure is down. So Starlink is down, the Iridium satellite network is down, the interwebs are down, and you need to communicate to this group, or even inside your own group. There's a couple pretty good options. Number one would be business class radios. So yes, you have to pay a fee for a business class license. Typically somebody will help you fill it out. So the FCC fee plus getting the business license, I would budget like $500 for that. Then the next step is you're going to end up with Motorola or Kenwood handsets, HTs, and mobiles. There are other brands, but those would be the two most common. So they're a lot more expensive than Baofangs are, let's say. But the advantage to business class is that you have legal encrypted communications between radios, and you also have channel hopping. So the Harris radios that Mike referred to, $20,000 radios, they're embargoed. Technically, as a civilian, you're not allowed to have them, and it's not hard to catch somebody with them, by the way. It's if the American government knows that you have Harris's, they will pinpoint you, and the NSA will pinpoint you in no time. But anyway, my point is that the business class radios are like the Baofangs and the other consumer level products as far as power is concerned. So they're VHF or UHF typically better, but the problem is distance. So if you don't have repeaters, if you're in a urban area, you're going to get 1.5 miles, 2 miles with no repeaters, HT, like handset to handset. If you have a mobile in your truck or a base station in your home, and you have let's say an antenna is 30, 40 feet high, again, in an urban environment, in my experience in Central Florida, you might get 10 miles of communication, but the business class radios, we have them for this specific reason. So secure comms being encrypted. The other thing is too, is the digital channels on business class radios are clearer than a cell phone. It's amazing how clear they are. The next part to it though, that's not encrypted, but you can do some interesting stuff. But the only true Walking Dead solution that will cover everything close, far, and around the entire world is shortwave HF, high frequency, 160 meters on down. And yes, not encrypted, but there are certain bands of frequencies that require very specific types of antennas at very specific heights, pointed in very specific directions that are not really common. So if somebody had the appropriate equipment, they could hone in on what you're communicating, but for the most part, probably not if you just apply a little bit of sophistication to the antenna side. Mike will tell you the antenna is everything when it comes to radios. You can have the best radio in the entire world. If you don't have the right radio for the right frequency for what you're doing, you're dead in the water right there. So with that being said, Mike, let's go into the fifth and final segment. So I called it Rising from the Rubble in the brief, essentially. So smoke clears, but the scars are still there. And like you said, you've got these wartime packs, right? You've got this connection to Omar because you went through a life or death combat situation with them. But, people will always, there's a psychological condition. I don't remember the name of it, but the human mind always strives to get back to normality as fast as possible, to put the craziness behind them as fast as possible. So I would expect that just like under normal circumstances would happen under these circumstances, keeping in mind lots of follow-on attacks, right? But let's say you've got co-ops forming, Mike, and the groups are going from individual groups in a community, probably banding together as larger groups in a more permanent way. And, those people, like I would hazard to guess that if let's say Omar was in close proximity to you and you had to do something and you needed help with it and was not military or combat related, and you had a choice of people to pick, you'd probably pick somebody like Omar that you could trust with your life, right? It's not super complex in that way of looking at it, but in the end, I think that the key to this as real Americans is that we will overcome, and American leadership will play a big role. And I mean, right down, I've said this many times, you see a little kid playing Pop Warner football, doesn't have the captain's jersey on, puts a hand out to help the opposing player up from the ground. That's leadership, and that's very American, and we pound it into real American psyches. I don't know if you caught this or not, Mike, but Randy is now referring to us as real Americans, and all those fucking woke progressive assholes, they're not real Americans.
I like that.
Yeah, we're everything now I refer to as real Americans. So, Mike, what happens? The shit's hit the fan from 9/11 2.0. We do have smaller follow-on attacks going on for quite some time, but how do the alliances between, let's say, communities, how does that turn into things like rebuilding communities, whether it be rebuilding people's homes, schools, all those sorts of things? You have young children. I mean, you're going to have to see things settle down pretty significantly before you decide to send your kids back to school, right?
Yeah, and I'm probably not going to do it immediately. I mean, if at all. I mean, one, my kids that were with me, I have two children from another relationship. The kids that are with me, they'll never go to school. If I had to say so across the board, none of my kids would ever go to a public school, potentially not even a private school. I homeschooled my kids through preschool, and then my two youngest will be homeschooled, and I'll teach them. Schools very inefficient, institutions are inefficient, and we see what happens when these establishments don't invest in basics like security. You can secure your bank, your federal government building, your Hollywood star, your athlete, but you can't secure your kids. That's a problem, and it's an institutional problem, which is also a people problem. And so I think, one, there's no rush. Two, I would lean in on the idea that this this potential attack was phased, and the first phase is to hit you hard, to break you down, and then while you're broken down, to hit you again, or while you're rebuilding, hit you again. That's how terrorism works. It doesn't work where it's like we want to break you down so you could build up and be stronger before. That's an American ideal, or it used to be an American ideal. So I would lean in on, one, playing it safe, taking the time to protect your family and community, and don't be so quick to convert back into the 9 to 5 again.
So it just occurred to me, Mike, do you not feel like you are robbing your children by not sending them to school, as far as being educated on the 300 different genders out there and discovering which one they actually are? I mean, don't you think that's a downside?
Yes, it's a huge downside unless you want your children to produce offspring and thrive in life. Yeah, the school is so inefficient. The fact that it's basically a daycare. I mean, that's all it is. It's a federal subsidized daycare. And the problem with education is, obviously, like, my children will never work for anybody unless it's deliberately pre-planned as a protocol for them to learn. I'll teach them how to run a business, how to be independent, and how to be self-reliant, which I think we should be taking as cues, not just for our children, but as individuals for ourselves.
So I'm sure you won't have any difficulty believing this, Mike, but I read an article a couple days ago where a school is teaching the children at the school, elementary age kids, by the way, that trans women, so men who are mentally ill pretending to be women, they were born women, but their female reproductive parts are on the outside of their body instead of the inside of their body.
Of course, man. I mean, obviously, that's serious mental health issues. And again, like I said it for so long and got attacked and annihilated. It was called transphobic and was suppressed on every single channel that I had, because I said, no offense, but the CDC and WHO is declaring this is a mental health disorder. So I don't understand why I can't say what I feel as a person for my own children. And we're still having the conversation and debate whether or not children should be brutally morphed into something they're not, with castration, with removing their breast, with chemicals, and with hormones.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's even a conversation, and those doctors are walking this country free, with so many people being persecuted, and these doctors can get away with that, which is obviously child abuse, which is obviously just insane. Yeah, I'm not surprised at where we're at as a country overall.
So, I mean, this is a great example why I say I'm not extending any olive branch. There's no reconciling with these people. They're not real Americans, and we're not going to come together ever again. And that most likely what's going to happen is we're already balkanizing, and the balkanization process is only going to accelerate. And you're not going to have two diametrically opposed cultures occupy the same geography for any period of time. I would also add that I can't remember if I mentioned this to you or not. I've got to go to Nashville to host a late night TV show in front of a live audience for a company called Liberty Forge. And it's going to be like a Johnny Carson type of night show. And so I did a bunch of interviews with them, Mike. And they said, okay, well, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars. We're going to fly you into Nashville to shoot this, blah, 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 blah. I said, just out of curiosity, why did you choose me? The very first thing they said, we love your rants against mentally ill transgenders. This whole show is going to be for conservatives. Seriously.
Oh, God.
Conservative night show. It's going to be the exact opposite of Saturday Night Live. So anyway, I do have one serious question before we wrap up chapter 5. And based on your experience in history, what pitfalls are there that trip up groups that bond when the shit hits the fan, but they have problems holding it together when there's peace?
That's a human dynamic. I mean, it's human psychology. The problem with this idea of this warrior class is that warrior class is made and bred for war, not garrison. And so I've seen the issue. I've managed men, I've managed warriors, and you always run into that. You have to occupy their purpose. Let me put it this way: you have to occupy their time with purpose. You have to do something that's meaningful for them, no matter what. And if it transitions into, hey, we're protecting our families now, we're not going and setting up checkpoints and going after the bad guys, well, then that's a different type of purpose. And if you could define that as a leader, and then you could cultivate that culture, then you'll be in a good place. If not, I mean, Rome always falls. That's just how it ends.
Yeah, let me get us back to the main stage here. I wasn't sure if we were going to have a main stage after that blow up earlier with StreamYard, but I'm glad you're still with me. Anyway, that's the gist of tonight's main topic. And at the end of the day, this threat landscape, which General Flynn spoke of 48 hours ago, we've been speaking about for many months now, has evolved. The terrorists are much more coordinated and advanced than they were during 9/11 1.0. And it's important that you have some sort of group. There's strength in numbers. You're not going to survive a major calamity if you're all by yourself, and that means just your household, even with yourself, maybe your kids. So I would first and foremost recommend that you get your get home bag and your get home plan and your get home routes and your paper maps, get that squared away, and definitely get your comms squared away. Dr. Michael Fabian and I will have another video here in about a month on the shortwave HF stuff, which is the Walking Dead plan, where you can literally communicate around the world, but it's complex and expensive because a lot of stuff doesn't work together. And we've put packages together. We're not selling it. We're just going to give you a list and say, go buy this stuff wherever you want to. So that's it for the main topic. The next part here, and we're almost done. We're almost wrapped up. I love this part. Mike, 3, 2, 1. I freaking love that. So it's the Carnival hero of the night, and my stuff got scrambled a little bit here. Give me a second to get the media back up on stage. All right, there we go. So the Carnival hero of the night. This police officer became a real life hero when he responded to a car fire and found Hank, a dog, trapped inside, curled up in the back seat trying to survive. He smashed the window, pulled Hank out, and saved his life. We're big time dog lovers. We rescue dogs, my wife and I, especially power breeds. 1 minute, 1 second long.
Dog in the car. Dog in the car. Oh my God! Where's it at? Put me in the back. Right here. Right here? Yeah. Hank, come on, man. Hank. Is it unlocked? Yeah. It's some sort of manual lock. It's right here. Come on. Hank, come on. Come on, buddy. I can't get you. Come on. Come on, Hank. Oh, God. Oh, okay. Oh, this is... Oh my God! Oh yeah! Dogs out, nothing else.
So, Mike, I'm not trying to be mean towards this guy at all. Just want to get your quick input on this. I think that's a pretty good example of somebody who is not trained for a high level of stress, losing the ability to do what would appear to be a relatively simple thing: reach in, grab your dog, and pull it out. What was your impression of that guy's reaction? I think he'd never probably been under stress like that's my guess.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be empathetic, but I also want to slap him in his face, because I'm just like, you see a man like that acting like, I mean, basically completely incapable of doing anything for himself, let alone his family, let alone his dog. I've experienced that. I had a situation where I pulled over to the side of a road, a bus, a beautiful $500,000 coach was on the side of the road. This guy was panicked, and I went up to him and I said, "What's going on?" He's like, "My wife and my cats are inside the bus and it's on fire." And I literally mushed his face out of my face and ran, grabbed my hatchet, smashed the window, went into the bus, pulled his wife, who was trying to find the cats on the bus, threw her off the bus. I got one of the cats out, and one of the cats burned to the ground. But I was like, I couldn't believe it. And then, this is what happens when you pay no attention to self-preservation in your life. When you think everybody else by design via your entitlement is supposed to come and rescue you and take care of everything for you. And that's what you get, from the mumbling to the shrieking in his voice, to the window's broken and his dog is sitting there and he's incapable of picking him up because he looks at the cop and says, like, "You're supposed to do this." And it's like, thank God there are first responders like that man who reached in and picked up the dog and saved his dog.
Yeah, our mutual friend Tony Blauer refers to this as people outsourcing their security to others, and for many decades now, and they just don't have any concept of these things because of what you just described. The next one, though, it's interesting. This came from Tim Smith. This is the reader submitted story of the day, Mike, and it's pretty perfect for your background. And I've got a short anecdotal story to tell on as well, but listen to this. I don't know if you caught this or not. Rich sniper tourists allegedly paid $90,000 to shoot civilians, including kids, during human safari trips to Sarajevo, wild claims allege. So this is back in the 90s when Milosevic had killed hundreds of thousands of people. Our satellites were picking it up where they were digging holes and pushing them into these mass graves. And this story comes out of nowhere that people were paying to go and pick these guys off as snipers. Listen to this one, Mike, and then I want to get your input on this. I've got a friend of mine who was over there as part of our peacekeeping force, which was a very small group. We weren't really big players in the whole Serbia, what was it, Bosnia Herzegovina or something like that. Anyway, he was at this site that we were exhuming where all these people were murdered and bulldozed. And he thought to himself, man, I got to take a piss. So he goes over to the row of porta potties, walks in, whips it out to take a piss, and at the last second changes his mind, thinks, I got to shit, so I'm going to sit down. No sooner did his ass cheeks touch the seat than several rounds went through the porta potty at the height of his head when he was standing. And come to find out afterwards that whoever, I don't even remember who the bad guys were, you probably remember who they were staking out these mass graves with snipers. And when our guys walked into these porta potties, they were shooting them in the head when they went in to take a piss. And if Reg hadn't have thought to himself, I should probably sit down and take a shit, he wouldn't be here today. From a sniper's perspective, a Green Berets perspective, just a Mike Glover perspective, I want to hear your comments on this. Who would pay $90,000 to kill other humans?
Well, other sick humans, and it exists all over the world. I mean, Bosnia was a significant campaign for certain members of the military, including the infantry and special operations. I mean, Delta was, they basically cut their teeth in Bosnia. I mean, they did more operations there that are being declassified recently than I actually know. And so it's a violent campaign. And again, there's parts of the world, and just like we talk about these terrorists who look at the infidel non-believers as people that are not people. They're just human scum, and they'll do anything to destroy them, including, picking off kids for money. I mean, these people are sick, and it's a part of how they're brought up. A lot of these people are vodka babies, and they have some major mental health issues, and there's only one way to deal with those type of terrorists.
So, it's just a crazy question, but when you were elsewhere, the Middle East, those sort of things, number one, did we have porta potties like out there where we were doing combat? And did you ever hear of anything like a sniper shooting somebody when they're taking a shit or taking a piss?
No, I mean that's not something that's common because they put the porta johns within like concrete barriers.
Okay.
I've engaged several bad guys in the shitter, so that's typically where they like to hide as their last resort, and then they pay for it. So
Wow.
a lot of the crappers overseas obviously are just holes in the ground. They would escape into their house's retreat, and then the one place that they could retreat from was the hole in the ground where their shit was gone, because they can go down into where the pile of poop is underneath the hole and then escape out where you would typically scoop it out as part of their sanitation, which isn't very sanitary. We'd catch them doing that, and I was with Jamie Caldwell, who owns a company called 30 Seconds Out, and he's a Delta operator. I was with him when I had just looked into the hole where there was a pile of poop, and I didn't see anybody. I had just walked away. Jamie went and looked in that same hole, and from the time that I went and looked and walked away, from the time that he went, which is probably 30 seconds, a guy had dropped down and he peeked in the hole and he shot the dude like 3 times in the face. And I thought to myself, wow, if that timing was a little bit off, and I was sitting there with at the time I was running an Afghan partnering unit of 5 Afghan operators, and I had looked in there and there was nobody there, and Jamie wasn't there to look in that hole behind me, I could have been shot in the back.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, that's a really shitty story, Mike. Just saying.
It stinks all to hell.
Right. I could have said it was a bullshit story, but I wouldn't do that. I like to say something like that.
You're made for this TV gig, man.
We shall see. I'll be in Tennessee, I think, next week for better part of next week.
Oh, that's so awesome. Congrats on that too.
They should be careful what they wish for. They might just get it. They probably don't realize just how bad the unfiltered Chris Evan actually is. But anyway, with that being said, we're pretty much wrapped up for tonight. One last quick reminder: if you head over to survivaldispatch.news, we have launched another signal channel. We have 5 signal channels now for our Guardians. Everything from emergency notifications to survival and prepping channel, to a general chat with like-minded individuals, to a news channel where we have a full news team of 12 super awesome people populating it. And we have a new 5th channel for ThreatWire, which are our security bulletins. John Wheaton is kicking shit. He's kicking the shit out of this. I got shit on my mind here, Mike. I can't get off my mind. Anyway, that ThreatWire channel has exploded. We just launched it. The volume of conversations is insane. We average 12,000 comments per week in the main signal channel, and ThreatWire is going to challenge that. So it's pretty incredible to see it all come together. But we're celebrating the launch of it. If you go to survivaldispatch.news, you can sign up for an annual subscription for only $59.99 instead of $74.99. You get access to all those channels, whole bunch of other cool stuff. And I won't beat the drum too much more on that. I will say this, though, quickly. We could not do what we do. I could not work the hours I work if it wasn't for Carnival. They pay us a stipend, a weekly stipend. It's not affiliate-related stuff. Read my article. Mike, did you see my article, by the way, on all the shit that they're doing to meat, like gluing it together and stuff like that? Gluing hunks of beef together and telling you, oh, this is a prime rib, it's a premium cut, and it's this shitty glue. Did you see the one on X where the guy Mike took a ladle and pushed on it and it turned all this like brown goo? It turned into shit, literally. And it's crazy. You don't get that with Carnival. No mRNA, no antibiotics, no histamines. American made, 100% ranchers. The bags American. Everything is American. Code Eat Meat gets you 10% off. And if you're over $99, you get free shipping as well. But that's it. We had a misfire on Monday night. We had a weird bug in StreamYard, Mike, where I said, God bless America. Enjoy the closing video. I hit the end button and it just went. Made me look like an asshole. But anyway, I appreciate your time and insight per usual, Mike. I'll talk to you soon. For everybody else out there, please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America. And for real, enjoy the closing video.
following preview is a hypothetical depiction of the future you deserve if you don't take action right now. This film has been rated R for Republican. The year is 2030. The Republican Party hasn't won an election since 2024. They lost the 2026 midterms along with the White House in 2028 because Trump's agenda never made it through the Senate. Every piece of America First legislation was blocked by the 60-vote procedural rule, otherwise known as the filibuster. It was all a colossal waste of time. Democrats currently control the White House, the Congress, as well as the Senate. The first thing they did was eliminate the filibuster so they could ram their radical agenda through the Senate completely unopposed. Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico are both states now. That gave the Democrats 4 extra Senate seats forever. They added 7 more judges to the Supreme Court, so conservatives are now outvoted on every decision for the foreseeable future. 5 of them are cross-dressing weirdos. Christianity is now illegal nationwide. Anyone caught praying or even owning a Bible is crucified in front of the Capitol. But it didn't have to be this way. It could have easily been avoided. All it would have taken was a small handful of weak and stupid Republicans to kill the filibuster back in 2025, when they had control of the White House and majorities in both the House and Senate.
It doesn't make any sense that a Republican would not want to do that.
After witnessing the miracle in July of 2024, it also doesn't make any sense for Republicans to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Yet here we are. If only people would have put more pressure on their representatives to kill the filibuster when they had the opportunity, the future would have turned out completely different.
Voter ID, no mail-in voting, no cash bail, no men and women's sports, no welfare for illegals. You could go on and on. This is 2 pages of things we'd do if you did that. Without it, I don't know that you passed anything.
Which future do you want, Republicans?
You must choose. But choose wisely.
This has been another public service announcement, paid for by the Dilly Meme Team.